You are standing in mud, not the soft, life-giving silt of the Nile's annual inundation, but a churned, bloody morass deep within the swamplands of the Bashmur Delta. The air, thick with the buzz of insects and the stench of decay, hangs heavy and wet, clinging to your skin like a shroud. Papyrus reeds, 10 feet tall, press in from all sides, their rustling whispers sounding like the secrets of a forgotten god. For generations, this labyrinth of water and reeds has been a refuge for your people, the Coptic Christians of Egypt, a place to hide from the tax collectors of the Caliph, a place to nurse grievances, a place to remember a time before the banners of Islam flew over the ancient land of the pharaohs. But today, it is not a refuge. It is a killing ground. You hear it before you see it, a rhythmic splashing, the clank of armour, the guttural commands in a language that is not your own. These are the soldiers of the Abbasid Caliph, Al-Mamun's veterans, men who have fought in the mountains of Persia and the plains of Syria. They are not the usual provincial garrison. They have been sent here with a single, brutal purpose: to finally crush this rebellion, to drain this swamp of defiance, to salt the earth where Coptic pride still grows. They come in shallow draft boats, their polished helmets glinting in the slivers of sunlight that pierce the canopy of reeds. They expect to find peasants armed with fishing spears and desperation. They are wrong. From the reeds, a shape emerges. He is a man you know, though he seems transformed. This is Abba Mina, a monk from the nearby monastery of Saint Macarius. He is not a large man, but his eyes burn with a fire that seems older than the desert itself. He wears the simple, dark robes of his order, but over them he has buckled a captured mail shirt, and in his hand he holds not a cross, but a heavy, curved scythe, its edge honed to a razor's sharpness. He does not shout. He does not need to. He simply raises the scythe, and from the murky water and the dense thickets his followers rise. They are the Bashmurians, fishermen, fowlers, papyrus cutters, men and women whose hands are calloused from hard labour and whose spirits have been hardened by centuries of quiet subjugation. They are armed with what they have: long poles tipped with fire, hardened points, weighted nets designed to foul oars and drag armoured men into the suffocating mud, and scythes like Mina's, weapons of the harvest repurposed for a grim reaping. Their greatest weapon, however, is the swamp itself. They know its every hidden channel, every submerged sandbar, every patch of quicksand. To the Abbasid soldiers, this is a green hell. To the Bashmurians, it is home. The battle, when it begins, is not a clash of shield walls and cavalry charges. It is a series of brutal, intimate ambushes. A net flies from the reeds, and a boat of soldiers is overturned, their heavy armour pulling them down into the black water. A volley of arrows, fletched with swamp bird feathers, rains down from unseen archers hidden in the papyrus. Men vanish with a choked cry, pulled under the surface by ropes tied to their ankles. You see Abba Mina move with a terrifying grace. His scythe is a blur, hooking shields, slicing through leather armour, cleaving helmets. He is not fighting with the frenzied rage of a cornered animal. He fights with the cold, methodical fury of a man enacting God's own judgment. The turning point comes at a narrow channel known as the Heron's Jaw. The Abbasid commander, a Turk named Afshin, tries to force his main contingent through, hoping to break out into the open land beyond the swamp. He has underestimated the Bashmurians' ingenuity. As his boats enter the channel, a great dam, cleverly constructed of mud and woven reeds, is breached upstream. A torrent of water, a controlled flood, surges down the channel. It swamps the boats, turns the battlefield into a churning chaos, and isolates Afshin and his personal guard on a small, muddy island. This is the moment Abba has been waiting for. He does not send his warriors. He poles a small skiff toward the island himself, alone. Afshin, a giant of a man draped in gilded armor, bellows a challenge, contemptuous of this lone monk in his drab robes. He expects a duel. What he gets is a lesson in the nature of this new war. Mina does not try to board the island. He circles it, just out of reach, his skiff gliding silently through the water. He begins to speak. His voice, amplified by the Coptic liturgy he has chanted his entire life, carrying clear across the water. He does not speak of territory or taxes. He speaks of the 42 generations of his people who have worked this land. He speaks of St. Mark, who brought the word of Christ to Alexandria when Rome still ruled the world. He speaks of the martyrs who died rather than renounce their faith. He speaks of a God who resides not in the gilded palaces of Baghdad, but in the heart of the common man, in the sacred waters of the Nile. To Afshin and his men, it is the babbling of an infidel, but to the hundreds of Bashmurian rebels listening from the reeds, it is a sermon of fire and steel. It is the articulation of everything they have been fighting for, a declaration that they are not merely rebels against a caliph, but the rightful inheritors of a kingdom that was ancient when the Prophet Muhammad was not yet born. When he finishes, a profound silence falls over the swamp. Then, from 1,000 throats, a single word echoes through the reeds. Misr, Egypt. It is not just a name for a province of the Caliphate. It is a proclamation. The final assault on the island is a tide of human fury. Afshin and his men fight with the disciplined bravery of professional soldiers. But they are overwhelmed. They are not fighting an army. They are fighting an idea. You see the Caliph's banner, a black standard embroidered with gold, falter, and then fall into the mud. You see Afshin, his fine armor dented and smeared with blood, cut down not by Mina, but by a dozen anonymous fishermen whose names will never be recorded by any historian. The news of the victory at Heron's Jaw spreads like wildfire. It is a spark in the dry tinder of Coptic resentment. From Pelusium in the east to the monasteries of Wadi el-Natron in the west, the cry is taken up. The small garrisons of Abbasid soldiers, isolated and terrified by the news from the Delta, are quickly overrun. Local Coptic bishops and village elders, who had previously counselled caution, now throw their support behind the rebellion. What began as a desperate revolt of swamp dwellers has become a national uprising. Within months, the unthinkable happens. The Abbasid governor in the provincial capital of Fustat is forced to flee, sailing from Alexandria with the remnants of his administration. He leaves behind a power vacuum, but one that is quickly filled. Abba, the warrior monk, makes his triumphal entry into the city. He does not ride a warhorse. He walks, barefoot, his scythe now replaced by a simple wooden cross. The Coptic Patriarch of Alexandria, the spiritual leader of all Egyptian Christians, meets him at the gates and proclaims him protector of the faith and sword of Misr. A new kingdom is born, forged in the mud and water of the Delta, the Kingdom of Misr. It is a state with no treasury, no formal army, no recognized borders. Its capital is a city still filled with a large Muslim population and a nervous Greek merchant class. Its leader is a monk who knows more about scripture than statecraft. To the north, across the sea, the mighty Byzantine Empire watches, with a mixture of hope and suspicion. To the east, in Baghdad, a humiliated and enraged Caliph al-Mamun vows to raise an army the likes of which the world has never seen, and wipe this fledgling kingdom from the face of the earth. The victory is intoxicating, a miracle made manifest. But as you stand on the banks of the Nile, watching the last of the Abbasid ships disappear over the horizon, a cold reality begins to set in. The reeds of the Bashmur gave your people their freedom, but building a nation, a fortress to protect that freedom, will require something more than scythes and faith. It will require stone and iron and a ruthlessness that the holy books do not teach. The pendulum has begun its swing, from the trough of subjugation to the peak of a fierce, defiant independence. The arc of its journey has just begun. The mud of the Bashmur is a memory. Now, you stand on the white stone of the Heptastadion, the great causeway that tethers the island of Pharos to the city of Alexandria. The air here is not thick with rotten reeds. It is sharp with salt and the scent of spices from 100 distant ports. Before you, the city spreads out like a jeweled fan, a testament to 1,000 years of wealth and power built by pharaohs, Greeks, and Romans. Behind you, the remains of the great lighthouse, the Pharos, though damaged by earthquakes centuries ago, still stand as a jagged monument to a world of wonders. This is the prize your people have won. And this is the trap. Alexandria is not a Coptic city, it is a world city. In its sprawling markets, you hear the harsh tones of Greek, the soft lilt of Syriac, the remnants of Latin, and the dominant cadence of Arabic. Coptic, your own tongue, is the language of the servant quarters and the quiet churches, not the language of commerce or philosophy. The men who control the shipping, the banking, the flow of grain that is the lifeblood of this land are Greeks, Jews, and even Muslim families who chose to stay, their loyalties as fluid as the tides. They look at Abamina and his followers not as liberators, but as a dangerous new variable in a very old equation. The victory that felt so absolute in the delta feels fragile here. Your Bashmurian warriors, so formidable in the swamps, are lost in the city's labyrinthine streets. They are an army of the land, yet their kingdom's fate now depends entirely on the sea. And from the east, the sea is bringing ruin. News travels on the merchant dhows that still ply the coastal routes. Caliph al-Ma'mun has not merely vowed revenge, he is enacting it. In the shipyards of Tyre and Acre, a fleet is being assembled. In the garrisons of Damascus and Raqqa, an army is being levied. This will not be a punitive expedition. It will be an invasion of overwhelming force, designed to reconquer the province and make an example of the rebels that will be spoken of for 1,000 years. Abamina can rally every Copt from the delta to the first cataract of the Nile, but he cannot stop a fleet from landing an army on the beaches west of the city. He has won a kingdom, and now he is going to have to watch it drown. The mood in the city is one of barely concealed panic. Grain prices are soaring. Merchants are hedging their bets, quietly moving their assets onto ships bound for Crete or Sicily. The city's new masters, the warrior monks and their peasant army, offer prayers and exhortations to faith. But faith cannot blunt a sword or sink a warship. Then, one morning, a different set of sails appears on the horizon. Not the triangular lateens of the Arab dhows, but the square sails of Byzantine dromons. At first, there are a dozen, then 20. By midday, a fleet of more than 50 warships lies at anchor just beyond the entrance to the eastern harbour. Their bronze-sheathed rams, glinting in the sunday, they fly the double-headed eagle of the Roman Empire, or the empire that still calls itself Roman. They make no hostile moves. They simply wait, a silent, powerful question floating on the water. Abamina is forced to make a choice that will define the future of his new kingdom. He knows who these people are. To the Coptic Church, the Byzantines are not brothers in Christ. They are the Chalcedonians, the imperialists, the ones who, at the Great Church Council 4 centuries ago, imposed a doctrine that the Egyptian church has always seen as a betrayal of the true nature of Christ. They are the ones who persecuted Coptic patriarchs, who drove the faithful into the desert. To trust them is to trust a viper, but to refuse them is to face the Abbasid storm alone. He agrees to meet their envoy. The meeting takes place in the Cathedral of St. Mark, the spiritual heart of Coptic Christianity. The building has been hastily reconsecrated, the signs of its recent use as a mosque scrubbed away but still lingering like a ghost in the air. The Byzantine envoy is a man named Leo Phocas, a patrician whose family has served the emperors in Constantinople for generations. He is everything the Bashmurians are not: urbane, eloquent in classical Greek, draped in silk, and wearing an expression of faint, polite condescension. He gets straight to the point. The emperor, Theophilos, sends his congratulations on the restoration of Christian governance in the ancient patriarchal see of Alexandria. A pleasant lie. What he means is that a chaotic, rebel-held Egypt is a problem, but an Abbasid-held Egypt, with its vast resources fueling a holy war against the empire, is a catastrophe. A Coptic kingdom, however heretical, is a useful buffer, a tool. The Caliph's fleet will sail within the month, Leo says, his voice echoing in the cavernous nave. His army is already on the march through Palestine. You have brave men. Abba Mina. I have read the reports, but your men fight with scythes. The Caliph's men fight with naphtha and siege engines. Your kingdom will not survive the summer. Abba Mina, standing before the altar in his simple monk's robes, his face weathered by the desert sun, remains silent. He lets the patrician lay out his offer. The emperor will provide the shield. The imperial navy will blockade the coast of the Levant, bottling up the Abbasid fleet in its ports. It will patrol the Egyptian coastline, ensuring no army can land. The Byzantine army in Anatolia will launch diversionary raids into Syria, forcing the Caliph to divide his forces. And the price? Mina's voice is raspy, unused to the acoustics of such a grand space. It is the voice of a man who is more comfortable speaking to God in the silence of a desert cave than negotiating with princes in a cathedral. Leo Phocas smiles. The price is twofold. First, the practical matter. The grain. For 200 years, the flow of Egyptian grain to Constantinople has been a memory. The emperor wishes to restore this ancient and natural arrangement. The imperial court will become the sole purchaser of Egypt's grain surplus, at a price fixed for 10 years. A price, I should add, that is most generous. A collective murmur runs through the Coptic elders gathered behind Mina. This is a staggering demand. It would make their kingdom an economic vassal of Constantinople, before it has even learned to stand on its own. It would redirect the single greatest source of their nation's wealth into the coffers of the empire. And the second price? Mina asks, his eyes narrowing. The second, Leo says, stepping forward, his tone shifting from that of a merchant to that of a priest, is a matter of the soul. For 400 years, a wound has festered within the body of Christ, a schism that weakens us all in the face of the Saracen. It is time to heal this wound. The emperor, in his wisdom and piety, asks only that the Patriarch of Alexandria formally accept the definitions of the Holy Council of Chalcedon, embrace the true faith, rejoin the universal church, and accept the spiritual guidance of the ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople. The silence that follows is absolute. This is not a negotiation. It is an ultimatum. Leo is asking them to surrender the very thing that defines them. The Coptic faith, their unique understanding of Christ's nature, is what has preserved them as a people through centuries of foreign rule. It is the bedrock of their identity. To abandon it would be to win a kingdom only to lose their soul. It would make their glorious revolution meaningless. a mere exchange of one master for another. You can see the conflict raging in Abba Mina's face. He is a monk, a man of faith, and every instinct tells him to cast this Chalcedonian serpent out of the holy house of Saint Mark. But he is also a leader, a protector, and he can hear the marching feet of the caliph's army. This is the moment where the pendulum's swing could be arrested, where the new kingdom could be reabsorbed into the orbit of a greater power. But Mina did not lead a rebellion to become a Byzantine puppet. He looks at Leophocus, and for the first time, the envoy sees the steel that defeated Afshin's army. "We will not renounce the faith of our fathers," Mina says, his voice low but unwavering. "We will not trade the caliph's yoke for the emperor's. The truth of God is not determined by councils of kings, but by the hearts of the faithful." Leophocus begins to protest, but Mina raises a hand. "But we are not fools. We know the value of your shield. So here is our offer. You will have your grain. A 20-year exclusive contract, 80% of the exportable surplus, at a price favorable to the imperial treasury. You will have a treaty of mutual defense against the caliph. Our armies will guard the land border of Palestine. Your navy will guard the sea. Our merchants will trade freely in your ports, and yours in ours, with tariffs no higher than 10%. He pauses, letting the scale of the economic concessions sink in. It is a king's ransom. But on the matter of God, he concludes, we will have an agreement to disagree. Your priests will not preach in our lands, and ours will not preach in yours. You may call us heretics in Constantinople, and we will pray for your souls in Alexandria. Our churches will remain separate, but our swords will be joined. That is the only pact we will make. It is an audacious counteroffer. Leophocus is stunned. He has been sent to acquire a protectorate, and he is being offered a partnership, a junior partnership, to be sure, but a partnership nonetheless. He weighs the options. The emperor wants doctrinal submission, but he needs strategic security and cheap grain. Mina is offering him both, in abundance, in exchange for letting a group of stubborn heretics maintain their pride. A pragmatic calculation is made. The grain is worth more than the creed. The agreement is written down, not on fine parchment, but on simple papyrus, the paper of Egypt. It is signed by Abba Mina, protector of Misr, and Leophocus, plenipotentiary of the Roman emperor. It becomes known as the Alexandrian Compact. It is not a declaration of friendship, but a contract born of mutual desperation and mutual suspicion. Days later, the Byzantine fleet sails into the great harbour of Alexandria. The crews line the decks of their warships, watching the Coptic crowds on the shore with suspicion. The people of Alexandria watch back with a mixture of profound relief and deep-seated unease. The banners of the double-headed eagle now fly from the harbour defences. The immediate threat of annihilation has passed. But as you watch the Byzantine admiral greet Abba Mina on the docks, you realise a fundamental truth of this new world. Freedom is not a single, glorious victory. It is a long, grinding negotiation, a constant balancing of faith and survival. The Kingdom of Misr is safe, for now, but it is no longer entirely its own. The alliance with the Romans of Constantinople has bought security, but it has sold a piece of Misr's soul. You feel this most acutely in Alexandria, where the compact is celebrated. The Greek merchants uncork their finest Chian wine, relieved that their trade routes are secure. Byzantine officials, now permanent residents, walk the canopic way with an air of proprietorship. The grain flows north in a steady stream of ships, and in return, Byzantine silver flows south. On the surface, it is a picture of newfound prosperity and stability. But beneath the surface, A dangerous current is pulling the kingdom apart. Abbasid, the hero of the Bashmur, feels like a stranger in his own capital. He sits in the former governor's palace, a building of Hellenistic grace and Roman grandeur, listening to reports on shipping manifests and currency exchange rates. He is surrounded by Alexandrian scribes who speak Coptic with a Greek accent, who quote Plato as readily as they quote St. Cyril. They see the compact as a brilliant masterstroke, a reintegration of Egypt into the sophisticated, cosmopolitan world of the Mediterranean. They speak of rebuilding the Great Library, of founding new schools of philosophy, of making Alexandria once again the intellectual capital of the world. But Mina hears a different voice. It comes on the hot winds from the south, from the vast, silent expanse of the desert. It is the voice of the Thebaid, the heartland of Coptic monasticism. It is the voice of the men who kept the faith pure in caves carved from the desert cliffs, the men who saw the compromises of city life as a slow-acting poison. To them, the Alexandrian Compact is not a victory. It is a betrayal. They did not overthrow the Saracens only to become errand boys for the Chalcedonian heretics. You travel south with Mina, up the Nile, away from the glittering, treacherous sea. With every mile, the landscape changes. The lush greenery of the delta gives way to a narrower, more intense ribbon of life, hemmed in on both sides by the stark, endless desert. The cities and towns here are different. No marble colonnades or Greek theatres. Here, the architecture is of mud, brick, and faith. The grandest structures are the monasteries, fortress-like complexes that loom over the river, their walls built as much to keep the world out as to repel invaders. This is where Mina's true power lies. In places like the monastery of St. Anthony and the White Monastery of Chanute, he is not just a protector, he is a prophet. The monks who pour out to greet him are gaunt, sun-darkened men with fire in their eyes. They are the spiritual descendants of the Desert Fathers, men who wrestled with demons in the solitude of the sands. They see the world in absolute terms: God and Satan, faith and heresy, Misr and the world. In the great, smoky halls of the desert monasteries, a new consensus is forged. The problem, they decide, is not the compact itself that was a bitter necessity. The problem is Alexandria. The city is a gateway not just for Byzantine ships, but for Byzantine ideas, for foreignness, for the dilution of the Coptic soul. It is a city that has always looked outward, to the sea, rather than inward, to God. If Misr is to survive, it cannot be ruled from this compromised, half-foreign port. It must be ruled from its heart. A grand council is held in the ancient city of Thebes. Once the capital of the pharaohs, it is now a provincial town, but it is surrounded by the most powerful monastic communities. It lies deep in the Egyptian heartland, far from the corrupting influence of the Mediterranean. Here, surrounded by the ruins of Karnak and Luxor, a new vision for the kingdom is born. Abbasid, bowing to the will of the monastic fathers, makes a stunning announcement. The capital of Misr will be moved from Alexandria to Thebes. Alexandria will remain the kingdom's commercial port, its window to the world, but its political power will be stripped away. This is a declaration of civil war in all but name. The merchant princes of Alexandria, the Greek-speaking intellectuals, and the new Byzantine functionaries are outraged. They see it as a regression, a flight from progress into the dark heart of religious fanaticism. They refuse to recognize the authority of the Theban council. For a tense few months, the kingdom has two heads: a secular, trade-oriented government in Alexandria and a monastic, faith-driven one in Thebes. The conflict is not decided by armies but by the control of food. Thebes, and the monasteries of the Thebaid control the vast agricultural lands of Upper Egypt. They control the harvest. With a single decree, they halt the shipment of grain, not to Constantinople, but to Alexandria. The cosmopolitan city, for all its wealth and sophistication, cannot survive without the food produced in its own hinterland. Within weeks, there are riots in the bakeries of Alexandria. The merchant council's authority evaporates. Their power, built on silver, is revealed to be nothing compared to the power of those who control the bread. The Alexandrian elite capitulates. The government is consolidated in Thebes. But this victory comes at a cost. The dream of a revived Hellenistic Alexandria, a beacon of philosophy and learning, is dead. The city's brightest minds, seeing no future in a state governed by desert monks, begin an exodus. They leave for Constantinople, for Antioch, even for Venice, taking their books, their skills, and their capital with them. Alexandria begins a slow decline into a mere functional port, its intellectual life extinguished. In Thebes, a new kind of state is constructed. It is a theocracy, pure and simple. Abamina, though he retains his title of protector, finds his power increasingly overshadowed by a council of the most powerful desert abbots. They design a government modelled not on Roman or Greek precedents, but on the internal hierarchy of a monastery. The kingdom is to be a reflection of God's perfect order. The ultimate expression of this is the creation of a new title for the ruler. The Patriarch of Alexandria remains the spiritual head of the church, but the head of state will be a new position. The Apeiros, the Father King. It is a title that merges the spiritual authority of an abbot with the temporal power of a monarch. Abamina, the monk who became a general, is the first to be crowned. But the rules of succession are clear. The next Apeiros will be chosen by the council of abbots from among their own number. Misr will not be a hereditary monarchy. It will be an elected theocracy, a kingdom ruled by saints. This is the Thebaid Ascendancy. It is a sharp, violent turn inward. The new state rejects the intellectual legacy of the Greco-Roman world that Alexandria cherished. The study of classical philosophy is banned as pagan. The use of Greek in official documents is replaced by Coptic. The focus of the state is no longer on engaging with the outside world, but on purifying the nation from within. The pendulum, which had briefly hovered over a cosmopolitan open future, now swings hard and fast toward an opposite extreme: isolation, piety, and a fierce, uncompromising dogmatism. The Kingdom of Misr is solidifying its identity, but in doing so, it is building walls around itself, not just of stone, but of the mind. You stand in the shadow of the great pylons of Karnak, watching a procession of chanting monks accompany the newly crowned Apeiros Mina into the ancient temple, now reconsecrated as the Cathedral of St. Pachomius. The air is thick with incense. The art being commissioned is not in the classical style of Alexandria, but is a revival of the stark, two-dimensional, spiritually intense style of ancient Coptic iconography. The kingdom is secure, unified, and has a powerful, coherent identity. But the quiet departure of the last philosopher from the docks of Alexandria feels like a profound and tragic loss, a sacrifice upon the altar of this new, pious certainty. Thebes is a capital built on prayer and stone. The air, dry and clean, carries the sound of liturgical chants from dawn until dusk. In the cool halls of the new Grand Basilica of Thebes, built beside the ruins of the Luxor Temple, the Council of Abbots, led by Apeiros Mina, charts the course of the nation. Their vision is not one of conquest or commerce, but of sanctification. Misr, they decree, will be a testament to God's glory, a kingdom whose very stones cry out in praise. The immense wealth of the Nile will not be used to build a merchant empire, but to create a holy land. This is the beginning of the Great Sanctification, a century-long, kingdom-wide building program that will reshape the face of Egypt. The logic is simple and powerful. The state, now effectively merged with the church, takes direct control of the kingdom's two great economic engines, the Nile's grain harvest and the Red Sea trade routes. The complex network of Greek and Syrian middlemen who once dominated these sectors is swept away. In their place, a new bureaucracy is established, staffed entirely by monks. These are not the contemplative ascetics of the desert caves, but a new breed, pragmatic, numerate monastics, drawn from the ancient administrative traditions of the Coptic Church, which has been managing vast landholdings for centuries. You see them at the great grain port of Clysma on the Red Sea. Monks in dark robes, their faces shaded from the brutal sun, oversee the loading of frankincense from Arabia and spices from the distant Malabar coast. They do not haggle over prices like the merchants of old. They operate from fixed ledgers and tithe tables, their calculations as precise and unyielding as their theology. A portion of the goods is set aside for the Byzantine trade as stipulated by the compact, a debt paid with cold efficiency. Another portion is sold to the caravans that travel west into the Maghreb and south into Nubia. But the vast majority of the profit, a river of gold and silver that once flowed into the private accounts of Alexandrian magnates or the distant coffers of Baghdad, is now funneled directly to the state treasury in Thebes. This wealth is immediately transformed into tangible expressions of faith. A decree is issued from Thebes. Every town and city in Misr shall have a new cathedral. Every significant monastery shall be rebuilt in stone and expanded. The roads connecting the holy sites shall be paved and protected by a new military order, the Agioi Stratiotai, the Holy Soldiers, a corps of warrior monks tasked with protecting pilgrims and the state's assets. The landscape of Egypt begins to change. Along the Nile, a new skyline emerges, not of pyramids or palaces, but of the domes and bell towers of thousands of new churches. These are not built in the classical style of Constantinople or Rome. They adhere to a strict, state-sanctioned Coptic aesthetic. The architecture is massive, fortress-like, with thick walls and narrow windows, reflecting a worldview that sees the outside world as a source of threat and temptation. Inside, every surface is covered in murals. The artists, all monks trained in monastery scriptoriums, paint in a deliberately archaic style. The figures are elongated, otherworldly, their eyes huge and staring into eternity. There is no interest in realism or perspective. The only goal is to convey theological truth. The story of Christ, of the martyrs, of the Desert Fathers, is told again and again, a visual catechism for the masses. This is the House of Golden God. It is a staggering achievement of social and economic mobilization. The entire population is swept up in the holy project. Peasants offer their labor as a form of religious devotion, quarrying stone and hauling it to construction sites. Artisans, masons, carpenters, glassblowers are organized into state-sponsored guilds, their work dedicated to the glory of God. The kingdom becomes a hive of devotional activity, a closed system where the nation's wealth and labor are recycled into monuments of its own piety. The social fabric is rewoven. The old, semi-feudal landlords who survived the transition from Roman to Arab rule are stripped of their estates, which are absorbed into the monastic landholdings. Society is flattened and reordered into a simple hierarchy. The ruling council of abbots and the appa uros at the top, the monastic bureaucracy managing the state's affairs, the military orders providing security, and the great mass of the faithful farmers and artisans providing the labor and the reverence. There is no real room for a secular middle class. no space for independent merchants or inquisitive scholars. Your worth is measured by your piety and your utility to the great project. Life becomes deeply ritualized. The calendar is governed not by seasons of trade, but by the liturgical cycle of feasts and fasts. Public life, from the marketplace to the law courts, is permeated by religion. Justice is administered by priests according to ecclesiastical law. Education is confined to the monasteries, focused on scripture, liturgy, and the hagiographies of the saints. The Kingdom of Misr becomes a strange and wondrous anomaly in the 9th century world. It is fabulously wealthy, yet its people live lives of ascetic simplicity. It is intensely organized, yet its goals are entirely spiritual. It is a fortress, both military and psychological. Travelers from Byzantium write with awe and confusion about this land of soldier saints and farmer monks. They describe cities where the tolling of church bells never ceases, and a countryside dotted with stone, churches that gleam like jewels in the desert Sunday. It is a society of absolute certainty, a perfect union of purpose, faith, and power. But as you walk the streets of the new Thebes, a city of churches and monasteries, where the only public art is religious iconography, you feel the profound silence that lies beneath the constant chanting. It is the silence of questions not being asked. The intellectual heritage of Alexandria has been so thoroughly purged that it is not even a memory. The world of science, of mathematics, of speculative philosophy that is flourishing in cities like Baghdad, despite the Caliphate's political troubles, has no entry point here. The focus is exclusively on the past, on preserving the faith of the apostles, on emulating the lives of the desert saints. The kingdom's mental gates are barred as tightly as its physical frontiers. The House of Gold and God is a magnificent edifice, a golden cage of faith. It has given the people of Misr a powerful sense of unity and purpose, protecting them from the chaos of the outside world. It has created a unique and stunningly beautiful material culture, but the cost is a form of self-imposed isolation. The pendulum has reached the zenith of its swing into the realm of pure faith. The kingdom is a perfect, hermetically sealed vessel, and in a changing world, any vessel so perfectly sealed, so unwilling to adapt, is in danger of becoming brittle. While the Kingdom of Misr turns inward, building its house of gold and God, the world it broke away from shatters. The shockwave from the loss of Egypt, delayed for a generation, finally hits the heart of the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad, and the center cannot hold. It is not a sudden collapse, but a slow, agonizing disintegration, a political death by 1,000 cuts. The foundational cause is simple: money. For 200 years, the caliphs had relied on the colossal tax revenues and grain shipments from Egypt to pay their armies, fund their bureaucracy, and finance the cultural efflorescence that would be known as the Islamic Golden Age. The grain fed the teeming metropolis of Baghdad, keeping the urban masses quiescent. The taxes paid the vast slave army of Turkic Gilman, whose loyalty was exclusively to the caliph who could guarantee their wages. When Abamina's rebellion succeeded and the Alexandrian compact locked Misr's wealth into a new orbit, it was a mortal wound. You are in Baghdad, in the late 9th century. The city is still a marvel, the largest on earth, a sprawling circle of palaces, mosques, and libraries on the banks of the Tigris. The intellectual energy is still palpable. In the House of Wisdom, translators still pore over Greek manuscripts of Aristotle and Euclid, and mathematicians debate the nature of zero. But this is a feverish, haunted brilliance. The city is bankrupt. The caliph, a distant and powerless figure, is a virtual prisoner in his palace. Real power lies with the Turkic generals who command the army. But with the Egyptian revenues gone, the treasury is empty. The generals resort to desperate measures. They squeeze the remaining provinces, particularly the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, with crippling taxes. They debase the currency, minting silver dirhams with less and less silver, leading to rampant inflation. The Gilman, their pay perpetually in arrears, become a ravenous plague. They mutiny, riot, and sack parts of the city they are supposed to protect. Caliphs are deposed, blinded, or murdered in a dizzying succession of coups. The period becomes known as the Anarchy at Samarra, a brutal testament to the fact that imperial power is built on treasure as much as on faith. The chaos in the capital radiates outward. Provincial governors, seeing the weakness at the centre, stop remitting taxes altogether. They become kings in all but name, establishing their own hereditary dynasties. The empire fractures along ancient geographic and sectarian fault lines. In the far west, the Maghreb, a powerful Sunni emir, whose family had long governed as semi-independent rulers, formally breaks away. He proclaims himself Sultan of the Maghreb, establishing a new capital at Tunis. His sultanate, controlling the western Mediterranean trade routes and the gold trade from across the Sahara, becomes a formidable power in its own right, a rival to the fading glory of Baghdad. The most dramatic schism occurs in the east, in the Persian heartland. For centuries, Persia had chafed under Arab rule, preserving its own language and culture. It was also a hotbed of Shia Islam, a sect that had long opposed the Sunni caliphs in Baghdad. A charismatic Persian general of aristocratic lineage, seizing on the widespread discontent, leads a successful revolt. But he does not merely declare independence. He taps into the deep well of Shia messianism. He declares himself the vanguard for the hidden imam and establishes a new caliphate in Isfahan, a Shia caliphate that directly challenges the religious authority of the Sunni caliph in Baghdad. The Islamic world is now irrevocably split into three. The rump Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad, controlling little more than Iraq, becomes a pathetic pawn in the games of its neighbours. In the west, the Sunni Sultanate of the Maghreb looks across the sea to Sicily and Iberia. In the east, the vibrant, aggressive Persian Shia Caliphate looks to expand into Central Asia and India. The single, unified Dar al-Islam that had stretched from the Atlantic to the Indus is gone forever. This fragmentation has profound cultural consequences. The very nature of the Islamic Golden Age is altered. With Baghdad's patronage gone, the great scholars, poets, and scientists scatter. Many are drawn to the new, wealthy court at Isfahan, which becomes a centre of Persian literature and Shia theology. Others travel to Tunis or Cordoba. The intellectual energy, once concentrated, is now diffused. It continues to burn brightly, but in smaller, competing fires. The grand, syncretic project of translating and integrating all of the world's knowledge, which had been the hallmark of Baghdad, falters. The different centres begin to develop in their own distinct directions. Isfahan focuses on philosophy and mysticism, Tunis on law and trade. The universalism of the early Abbasid era gives way to a new regionalism. The holy cities of Mecca and Medina, located in the arid Hejaz, become a prize fought over by the rival powers. Control of the annual Hajj pilgrimage is a source of immense prestige. For a time, they fall under the sway of the Maghrebi Sultanate, whose proximity and naval power in the Red Sea give it an advantage. This further humiliates the Abbasids and enrages the Persians. The land of the Levant, Syria, and Palestine becomes a fractured battleground. Without a strong central authority, the region breaks apart into a patchwork of petty Amorites ruled by local warlords and Bedouin chieftains. The cities of Damascus, Aleppo, and Jerusalem change hands frequently. It is a land of endemic warfare, political instability, and decaying infrastructure. The old Roman roads fall into disrepair. The great trade routes that once crossed the Syrian desert become perilous and are slowly abandoned in favor of the sea routes now controlled by the Byzantines and their strange Coptic allies. You stand on the ancient walls of Jerusalem, a city now ruled by a minor Bedouin sheikh who pays nominal allegiance to whichever distant ruler last sent him a bag of gold. The city is impoverished, its great mosques and churches poorly maintained. Christian pilgrims from the Byzantine Empire still arrive, but in smaller numbers, their journeys fraught with danger. The concept of a powerful, unified Islamic empire capable of projecting its power and guaranteeing safe passage is a distant memory. The Crescent, once a seemingly monolithic symbol of power, is now shattered into a dozen competing shards. This new reality is watched with keen interest from Thebes. The collapse of their great enemy is seen as a sign of God's favor, a divine reward for their piety. It confirms the wisdom of their inward turn, their decision to seal themselves off from the chaos of a dying world. The border in the Sinai is quiet. The fractured Amorites of Palestine are too busy fighting each other to pose any threat to the fortified Kingdom of Misr. The monks in their fortress monasteries look out over the eastern desert and see not danger, but proof of their own righteousness. They have built their house upon a rock, while their enemies built theirs upon the sand. And now the storm has come, and the house of the enemy has fallen. This sense of security, this profound belief in their own exceptionalism, becomes the new bedrock of the Coptic Kingdom's identity. It is a comforting belief, but a dangerous one. It breeds complacency. It assumes the shattered world will remain shattered forever. The world turns. 2 centuries pass in the Kingdom of Misr in a long, quiet dream of stone and prayer. The great sanctification is completed. The land is stitched together by a network of fortress monasteries and pilgrimage roads. The dynasty of the Upper Oroi rules from Thebes in serene, pious succession, each father king chosen by the council of abbots for his unimpeachable holiness. The kingdom has become a timeless artifact, a society polished to a state of near perfection in its own eyes, governed by the rhythmic cycles of the liturgy and the Nile. Its wealth is immense, its borders secure, its faith absolute. It has forgotten what it is to be challenged. Meanwhile, beyond the placid horizon of this Coptic paradise, a different world has been stirring. In the lands of the Franks, the Normans, and the Germans, a new energy is rising. Their world is not one of serene stability, but of ferocious dynamism. They are a people driven by a restless fusion of faith, greed, and violence. Their stone castles are not quiet monasteries. They are the dens of ambitious warlords. For generations, this energy has been directed inward, in feudal squabbles and Viking raids. But now, at the turn of the millennium, it begins to look outward. The catalyst is the chaos in the Levant. The tales told by the few, hardy pilgrims who make it back from Jerusalem are not of holy exaltation, but of robbery, murder, and desecration. They speak of churches being burned by petty warlords, of pilgrims being taxed exorbitantly at every city gate, of the Holy Sepulchre itself being controlled by a capricious emir who uses it to extort gold from the faithful. These stories, amplified by the fiery preaching of reformers in Rome, ignite a spark in the soul of Western Christendom. An idea begins to take hold. The Holy Land, the land of Christ's birth and resurrection, must be reclaimed from the infidel and secured for Christian piety. They call themselves the Peregrini, the pilgrims, but they do not come with walking staffs and prayer books. They come with chainmail, kite shields, and heavy lances. They are an army, or rather a collection of armies, a tide of iron and faith pouring out of Europe and heading east. Their leaders, Normans from Sicily, Franks from Lorraine, Provençals from Toulouse, are a mix of the devout and the opportunistic, men seeking salvation and men seeking new lands to conquer. They travel by sea, their ships hugging the coast of a Byzantine empire that views their arrival with profound alarm. The emperor in Constantinople, Alexios Komnenos, had appealed to the West for mercenaries to help him reclaim Anatolia from the Turks. He did not expect this undisciplined, fanatical horde to arrive on his doorstep, demanding passage to Jerusalem. He sees them for what they are: dangerous, unpredictable barbarians, schismatics who follow the Pope in Rome, not the Patriarch in Constantinople. He extracts oaths of allegiance, ferries them across the Bosphorus as quickly as possible, and washes his hands of them. The Peregrini crash into the fractured world of the Levant like a meteorite. The petty emirs and Turkish warlords, accustomed to fighting each other, are utterly unprepared for the disciplined, brutal shock of a heavy cavalry charge. The Western Knights, fighting with a unity of purpose their foes have not known for centuries, carve a bloody path down the coast. They take Nicaea. They take Antioch after a brutal siege. And then, in the year 1099, they stand before the walls of Jerusalem. The city falls in a storm of religious bloodlust and slaughter. The news of these events arrives in Thebes as a series of confused, shocking reports. The monks of Misr do not know what to make of these Franks. They are Christians, but of a strange and violent sort. They are Chalcedonians, like the Byzantines, but they seem to hold the emperor in Constantinople in as much contempt as they do the Saracens. They have liberated the Holy Land, but their methods seem savage, their motives rapacious. The Apa Oros and his council of abbots watch from a distance with a deep and abiding suspicion. This is a storm in the outside world, a clash of barbarians. It has nothing to do with the sanctified Kingdom of Misr. This illusion of detachment is shattered when a delegation of the Peregrini leaders travels south to Egypt. They are led by a towering Norman knight named Bohemond, who has styled himself the Prince of Antioch. They do not come as supplicants. They come with the arrogance of conquerors. Their journey through the Sinai is a revelation. They are stunned by the wealth and order they see. The paved roads, the fortified monasteries, the well-tended fields, the sheer number of magnificent stone churches. It is a Christian kingdom more powerful and ancient than anything they could have imagined. They had thought themselves the sole champions of Christ in the East. They have stumbled upon a silent, elder brother. The meeting takes place in a fortified monastery on the kingdom's eastern border, a place called Pelusium. The contrast between the two groups is stark. The Frankish knights are huge men, bearded and boisterous, their heavy armour clanking on the stone floors. They are warriors, princes of blood and iron. The Coptic delegation is composed of slender, soft-spoken monks in simple black robes. Their authority derived not from their swords, but from their sanctity. Bohemond, through a nervous Byzantine interpreter, lays out his proposition. He speaks of a grand Christian alliance. The new Crusader states his own Principality of Antioch and the nascent Kingdom of Jerusalem are a fragile beachhead in a hostile land. They need allies. They need the wealth and manpower of Misr. Together, he proclaims, the Franks and the Copts, soldiers of the Western and Eastern Christ, can drive the Saracen from all of Syria, from Mesopotamia, perhaps even from Persia itself. It is a vision of a grand, militant, expansionist Christianity. The head of the Coptic delegation, an aged abbot named Shenouda, listens with quiet patience. When Bohemond is finished, Shenouda responds in Coptic. his words translated for the Franks. "We praise God for the liberation of the holy city of Jerusalem," he says, his voice devoid of emotion. "We will send skilled artisans to help rebuild the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. We will offer prayers for the souls of your dead. But the Kingdom of Misr does not wage holy war. Our kingdom is a house of prayer, not a camp of soldiers. Our duty is to preserve the faith within our borders, not to spread it with the sword." Bohemond is incredulous. He speaks of the threat from the Turks, of the inevitable Saracen counterattack. Shenouda nods. "The Saracens are a whirlwind of dust in the desert. Sometimes the wind blows east, sometimes it blows west. We have built our walls high. The whirlwind does not concern us. You have chosen to build your house in the path of the wind. That is your affair." He then delivers the final, crushing statement of Misri policy. "You are welcome to come as pilgrims to the holy sites of our kingdom. The monasteries of St. Anthony and St. Macarius will offer you their hospitality. But you will come unarmed. You will come as men of God, not as men of war. Your armies are not welcome in Misr. Your ambitions are not our ambitions. We are brothers in Christ, but we are not partners in conquest." The Franks are stunned, then outraged. They see this not as piety, but as cowardice and heresy. They see the vast wealth of Misr, and they see it being withheld from the holy cause. They came seeking an ally, and found a locked door. The meeting ends in acrimony. Bohemond and his knights ride back north, their minds filled with a new, dangerous idea. They now see Misr not as a potential ally, but as a rival. A rich, complacent kingdom of schismatics, hoarding treasure that could be used to fund the defense of the Holy Land. The arrival of the Peregrini, the Uninvited Cross, fundamentally changes Misr's position in the world. For 200 years, its isolation was a source of strength and stability. Now, it is a source of vulnerability. The kingdom is caught between two worlds. To the east and north, the shattered Islamic states are slowly beginning to regroup, their fury stoked by the Frankish invasion. And now, on their very doorstep, is a new, aggressive Christian power that views them with contempt and envy. The high walls of the House of Gold and God, once a symbol of serene detachment, now feel like the walls of a gilded cage. The world, in all its violent complexity, has returned to the borders of Misr, and it will not be ignored. In the silent, incense-filled halls of Thebes, a new emotion has taken root. Fear. It is a cold, unfamiliar sensation for a kingdom that has known nothing but security and divine favour for 2 centuries. The reports from the north are the source of this disquiet. The Peregrini, the pale-eyed Franks, are consolidating their hold on the Levantine coast. Their castles, brutish and formidable, rise from the hills of Galilee to the plains of Edessa. They fight with a savagery that unnerves even the most hardened observers. And in their cups, in the taverns of Jerusalem and Antioch, they speak with open envy of the hoarded gold of the heretic Copts. The rejection of Bohemond's offer of alliance, an act of supreme spiritual confidence at the time, now seems like a rash and dangerous gamble. The Apauros, a frail elderly monk named Marcos, and his council of abbots, find themselves in a strategic nightmare of their own making. To the north are the unpredictable Franks. To the east, the scattered Saracen Amorites are beginning to coalesce around a new Turkish warlord in Mosul, a man named Zengi, whose name is whispered with a mixture of terror and hope in the markets of Damascus. Misr, the perfect kingdom, is trapped. It is a jewel coveted by 2 different sets of thieves. The policy of splendid isolation has failed. The high walls of faith are not enough. This realization dawns slowly, reluctantly, in the council chambers. It is a younger abbot, a man named Paphnutius, who once served as an administrator at the southern frontier post of Aswan, who dares to speak the new truth. For 200 years, we have looked inward to God, he says, his voice steady in the tense silence, and God has blessed us. But we have also turned our back on our brothers. We have been so focused on the devils in the north, the Chalcedonians and the Saracens, that we have forgotten the saints to the south. He speaks of Nubia. He speaks of the two Christian kingdoms that lie beyond the first cataract of the Nile, Makuria and, further south, Alodia. These are not distant, half-mythical lands. They are ancient kingdoms, co-religionists who look to the Patriarch of Alexandria as their own spiritual father. For centuries, the relationship has been one of quiet, passive brotherhood. Misr sends priests and bishops south. Nubia sends pilgrims and gold north. A treaty, the Baqt, signed with the Muslim rulers before the rebellion, had defined their relationship for centuries, but it is a relic of a bygone age. Now, Paphnutius argues it is time for a new pact, an alliance of equals forged in the face of a new danger. The idea is radical. It means actively engaging with the world, seeking allies, practicing statecraft. It is the first crack in the rigid ideology of the Thebaid ascendancy, but fear is a powerful motivator. After weeks of debate and prayer, the decision is made. A delegation, led by Paphnutius himself, will travel south to Dongola, the capital of Makuria, to propose a formal military and religious alliance. The journey itself is a pilgrimage into another world. Your barge passes the great temple of Philae at the traditional border of Egypt, and as you are guided through the churning waters of the first cataract, the landscape transforms. The familiar, wide floodplains of the Egyptian Nile narrow. The desert presses in, its mountains of black granite and red sandstone crowding the river's edge. This is a harder, more rugged land. The people, too, are different, darker skinned. Their features a beautiful fusion of Nile Valley and sub-Saharan African ancestries. You pass fortress churches perched on cliffs, their walls painted with vibrant images of dark-skinned archangels and saints. The language spoken here is not Coptic, but Old Nubian, a tongue with its own unique script. This is not a mere extension of Misr. It is a sister civilization, ancient and proud. The capital, Dongola, is a revelation. It is not a city of massive stone monuments like Thebes. It is a sprawling city of fired red brick, its churches topped with soaring domes. The royal palace is a magnificent multi-storied structure, its walls covered in brightly coloured frescoes, depicting not only religious scenes, but also the triumphs of the Nubian kings in battle. Lions hunted, enemies vanquished, and everywhere you see the warrior. The men of Makuria are lean and hard, renowned throughout the known world as the finest archers alive. The pupil smiters, the Arabs had called them, for their terrifying accuracy. The delegation is brought before the king of Makuria, George IV. He is no monk king. He is a warrior, broad-shouldered and scarred, his throne room filled not with chanting abbots, but with the commanders of his army. He listens to Paphnutius's proposal with a guarded expression. He is well aware of the Franks. His own southern borders are perpetually threatened by nomadic tribes from the deserts and the rising power of the Sultan of the Maghreb, who seeks to control the trans-Saharan trade routes. "You come to us now because you are afraid," the king says, his Coptic accented but clear. "For 200 years, your kingdom has sat alone in its wealth, content to be our spiritual father, but not our brother in arms. The world has been a dangerous place for us for a long time. You are only just noticing." Paphnutius bows his head. "We have been arrogant in our piety," he admits. "We built a garden, and thought we could ignore the desert. Now, the desert winds blow from all directions. We ask you to help us build a stronger wall. The negotiations are long and hard. The Nubians are not supplicants. They demand a high price for their alliance. They need Misri engineers to help build new fortifications along their southern border. They need Misri grain to supplement their own narrower harvests and feed their standing army. They need weapons, not just bows and arrows, but the steel swords and armor that Misr produces with its advanced forges. In return, they offer what Misr needs most: an army and strategic depth. The king of Makuria pledges to personally lead a force of 10,000 elite archers to reinforce Misr's eastern frontier in the Sinai should the Franks or the Saracens invade. He also agrees to use his own forces to pacify the chaotic western desert, creating a secure buffer zone against the Maghrebi Sultanate. The two kingdoms, together with Alodia to the south, which exists under Makuria's sphere of influence, would form a single, contiguous Christian bloc, controlling the entire Nile Valley from the Mediterranean to the highlands of Ethiopia. They would be able to pool their resources, coordinate their defences, and face the outside world as a united front. The alliance is sealed in the great cathedral of Dongola. It is called the Pact of the Two Lions, the Lion of St. Mark, the symbol of the Coptic Patriarchate and the Lion of Judah, a symbol of royalty embraced by the Nubian kings. Paphnutius and King George sign a document written in both Coptic and Old Nubian, pledging their kingdoms to mutual defense, economic cooperation, and eternal brotherhood in the Miaphysite faith. The return journey to Thebes is triumphant. The news of the pact is met with enormous relief. The Kingdom of Misr is no longer alone. The fear that had gripped the capital recedes, replaced by a renewed sense of confidence. The southern flank is secure, anchored by a powerful and reliable ally. The state's resources can now be fully directed to fortifying the Sinai frontier. The holy soldiers, the warrior monks of Misr, begin to train alongside Nubian archery masters, the heavy infantry of the north, learning to fight in concert with the swift-moving skirmishers of the south. This alliance, born of fear, fundamentally changes the character of the Coptic Kingdom. It is the first major foreign policy decision in 2 centuries that is proactive, not reactive, strategic, not theological. It has forced the monastic council to think like kings, not just like abbots. They have had to negotiate, to compromise, to trade wealth for security. The perfect, sealed world of the House of Gold and God has been breached, not by an enemy, but by a friend. A window has been opened to the south, letting in a new light and a new perspective. The pendulum, held for so long at the peak of isolation, has made its first decisive swing away from the extreme. The Pact of the Two Lions brings a century of armed peace to the Kingdom of Misr. The alliance works. The Sinai frontier becomes a formidable line of fortresses, jointly garrisoned by the heavy infantry of the Misri holy soldiers and the peerless archers of Nubia. To the Frankish princes of Jerusalem, the Coptic Kingdom is no longer a soft target, but a hedgehog of defences. To the east, the rising power of the Zengids, and later the Ayyubids under Salah ad-Din, finds itself checked. While they succeed in driving the Franks from Jerusalem and retaking much of the Levant, the prospect of a southern invasion into Misr with its united front and Nubian reinforcements is too daunting. Salah ad-Din directs his ambitions east, towards Mesopotamia, not south. Misr is left untouched by the great wars that convulse the Holy Land. This renewed security, however, breeds a new kind of problem. The kingdom grows complacent again, but in a different way. The theocracy in Thebes, its strategic anxieties calmed, calcifies. The rule of the Apa Uroi and the Council of Abbots becomes a rigid, unchanging ritual. The state continues to function with its monastic efficiency, the grain flowing, the taxes collected, the churches maintained. But it is a society without dynamism, without questions. The official, state-sanctioned culture, with its stark iconography and endlessly repeated hagiographies, becomes suffocating in its certainty. It is in Alexandria that the first cracks appear. The city, though politically neutered, remains Misr's window on the world. It is here that the grain ships bound for Constantinople are loaded. It is here that Venetian and Genoese merchants, having eclipsed the Byzantines as the primary carriers of trade, have established small, walled-off trading posts, or fondaci. It is here that Nubian diplomats, Persian merchants, and even the occasional Frankish pilgrim can be found. And it is here that ideas, the most dangerous contraband of all, are smuggled ashore. Within the city's ancient Coptic aristocracy, families who trace their lineage back to the scholars and bishops of the Roman era, who never fully embraced the ascetic fanaticism of the Thebaid, a silent rebellion begins. It is not a rebellion of swords, but of whispers. It starts in the private libraries of wealthy families, in secluded study circles that meet under the cover of darkness. They are tired of the endless, sterile theology of Thebes. They hunger for something more. They begin to collect and secretly trade the books that are brought by foreign ships. From Constantinople, they acquire copies of Plato and the Greek tragedians, works of philosophy and literature long banned by the Theban Council. From the Italian merchants, they get Latin translations of Aristotle, filtered through the great Arab philosophers like Ibn Sina and Ibn Rushd, whose works were thriving in Cordoba and Tunis. These texts, which the monastic state has deemed pagan or heretical, open up a new universe of thought. They speak of logic, of reason, of observing the natural world, of questioning authority. This clandestine movement coalesces around a charismatic figure, a wealthy physician and scholar named Cosmas. He is a man of vast erudition, fluent in Coptic, Greek, Arabic, and now learning Latin from a Venetian contact. He does not seek to overthrow the state. He sees himself as a loyal son of Misr, but one who believes the kingdom has lost its way, sacrificing its intellectual inheritance for a narrow and fearful piety. In his villa in the old Bruchion quarter, Cosmas organizes a secret society. They call themselves the Logos Society, a deliberately ambiguous name. To the authorities, it could mean the Society of the Word of God. To its members, it means the Society of Reason. Their symbol is the Chi-Rho, the ancient sign of Christ, but with a small owl, the symbol of Athena, goddess of wisdom, perched discreetly on the upper curve. The Logos Society is an eclectic mix. It includes physicians weary of relying on faith, healing, and prayer alone, astronomers who want to study the stars with mathematics rather than astrology, merchants who want to understand the principles of finance and law from the Italian republics, and even a few younger priests who feel spiritually stifled by the rigid dogma of the Theban establishment. They conduct experiments. They dissect animals to understand anatomy, a practice forbidden as a desecration. They build astrolabes based on Arab designs to chart the heavens. Most dangerously, they apply the tools of logic and textual analysis, learned from the Greeks, to their own sacred texts. They begin to compare the Coptic scriptures with the Greek versions brought from Byzantium, noting differences, questioning translations, and discussing the historical context of the Bible in a way that would be considered blasphemous in Thebes. They do not lose their faith, but they begin to see it as something to be understood through reason, not just accepted through blind obedience. For decades, the society operates in the deepest secrecy. Membership is by invitation only, after a long period of vetting. They develop codes and secret meeting places. They are the intellectual equivalent of a conspiracy, a silent schism opening within the monolithic structure of the Coptic state. They represent the first swing of the pendulum's return journey away from pure, unthinking faith. The tension between the two poles of Misri society, the rigid theocracy of Thebes and the burgeoning intellectual underground of Alexandria, is a silent, undeclared war for the nation's soul. Thebes represents the past. Stability, piety, isolation, and certainty. Alexandria, through the Logos society, represents a potential future, inquiry, engagement with the outside world, and the terrifying, liberating power of doubt. You are in a hidden room in the catacombs beneath Alexandria, the air cool and tasting of ancient dust. By the light of oil lamps, Cosmos is demonstrating a new device to a dozen members of the society. It is a primitive form of printing press, using carved wooden blocks, an idea he has adapted from a description given to him by a merchant who travelled the Silk Road and had seen such things in distant China. He carefully inks a block carved with a page from Euclid's Elements and presses it onto a sheet of papyrus. The result is a clear, perfect copy. The abbots in Thebes control the scribes. Cosmos whispers, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. They control what is written, what is copied, what is preserved. They believe they can control knowledge itself. But with this, he holds up the printed page. Knowledge has wings. An idea can now travel faster than a monk on a barge. We can share the wisdom of the ancients, the discoveries of the Arabs, the learning of the Franks. We can awaken the mind of Misr. The members look at the simple printed page with a sense of awe and terror. They understand what it means. This is a weapon, more powerful than any sword or Nubian bow. It is a tool that can break the monopoly on information that has been the bedrock of the theocratic state for 300 years. The silent schism has just found its voice. The pendulum, which has been hovering at its apex for so long, has started to accelerate on its downward swing. The forces of change, suppressed for centuries, are gathering strength in the shadows. The long, quiet dream of the Kingdom of Saints is about to have a rude awakening. While the Logos Society toils in the secret lamplit rooms of Alexandria, the world outside Misr's fortified borders continues its own relentless churn. The Ayyubid Sultanate, which had once threatened the kingdom under Salah ad-Din, fragments after his death, just as the Abbasid Caliphate did centuries before. The Frankish kingdoms in the Levant, now confined to a narrow coastal strip around Acre and Tyre, are a shadow of their former power, more interested in trade with the Italian republics than in conquest. A deceptive calm settles over the northern and eastern frontiers. The walls of Misr seem to have worked. But the threat, when it comes, does not come from the expected direction. It does not come from the horsemen of Syria or the knights of Utrama. It comes from the sea. It comes from the south. It comes from a people long thought of as a marginal nuisance, the Behar. The Behar are a fiercely independent, nomadic people who have inhabited the harsh deserts between the Nile and the Red Sea for millennia. For centuries they have been a thorn in the side of every power that has tried to rule the region: Romans, Arabs, and now the Copts. They are master camel riders, skilled raiders, and most importantly, they are superb sailors of the treacherous Red Sea. During the long peace of the Misri kingdom, they were largely quiescent, content to trade and occasionally raid the southern frontier, a problem managed by the Nubian allies. But now, in the 13th century, two things change. The first is the rise of the Mamluks, in what was once Ayyubid Egypt's great rival, the Sunni Sultanate of the Maghreb. The Maghrebi Sultanate has grown rich on the trans-Saharan gold trade and now seeks to project its power eastward. It sees the Coptic Kingdom, with its monopoly on the lucrative Indian Ocean trade routes, as its primary economic and religious rival. The second change is religion. The Behar, long practitioners of their own syncretic faiths, are converted en masse to a particularly militant and puritanical form of Sunni Islam by preachers from the Maghreb. The Sultan in Tunis sees an opportunity. He cannot challenge the Misri Nubian armies on land, but he can bleed them by sea. He begins to secretly fund the Beja chieftains, providing them with gold, weapons, and, most crucially, shipwrights from Tunis and Algiers, who know how to build larger, faster dhows capable of mounting light catapults and carrying large crews of warriors. A new power is born in the Red Sea. They are not pirates, fighting for random plunder. They are corsairs, privateers waging a holy war of commerce on behalf of a foreign power. Their bases are in the hidden coves and mangrove swamps of the southern Red Sea coast, in places like Suakin and Massawa, far from the reach of the Misri navy, which is based in the north at Klizma. Their attacks begin as a trickle, then become a flood. A lone merchant ship, laden with spices from Malabar and silks from China, is found adrift and burning off the coast of the Hejaz. A pilgrim vessel heading for the Axumite Christian kingdom in Ethiopia is captured, its passengers sold into slavery. Soon, no ship flying the banner of the Apauros is safe. The Behar Corsairs hunt in wolf packs. They are daring and utterly ruthless. They know the currents and the reefs of the Red Sea better than anyone. They strike without warning and vanish back into their coastal lairs. The economic effect on the Kingdom of Misr is catastrophic. The Red Sea trade is not a peripheral part of the state's economy. It is the state's economy. The grain that goes to Constantinople pays for the alliance with the Byzantines, but the vast wealth from the spice and silk trade pays for everything else. The army, the bureaucracy, the maintenance of the thousands of churches and monasteries. It is the gold that funds the entire house of God. Within a decade, the flow of that gold is reduced to a trickle. The treasury in Thebes begins to run dry. For the first time in its history, the monastic state is forced to levy a direct tax on the peasantry, a deeply unpopular move that shatters the centuries-old compact of piety and prosperity. The maintenance on the great churches is deferred. The pay for the holy soldiers and the subsidies for the Nubian archers fall into arrears. The perfect, sanctified kingdom is beginning to rust from the inside out. The Apauros and his council of abbots are at a complete loss. Their entire worldview is based on land power and defensive fortification. They understand walls and infantry. They do not understand naval strategy, blockades, or commerce raiding. Their response is to pray for deliverance and to send their small, antiquated navy on ponderous, punitive expeditions that find nothing but empty coastline, while the corsairs raid with impunity elsewhere. The problem is not a lack of faith. It is a lack of imagination. Their rigid, inward-looking culture has left them unable to adapt to a new kind of threat. In Alexandria, the Logos Society watches the crisis unfold with a mixture of alarm and opportunity. The merchants in their circle are being ruined. The state that oppresses them is visibly weakening. Cosmos's successor as the head of the society, a brilliant but pragmatic engineer named Heron, sees that the government's failure is creating a power vacuum. Heron, using the society's secret printing press, begins to produce pamphlets. They are written in a simple, direct Coptic, designed to be read aloud in the marketplaces. They are anonymous, attributed only to a concerned son of Misr. The pamphlets do not call for rebellion. Instead, they do something far more subversive. They analyze the crisis with cold, brutal logic. One pamphlet, titled "The Empty Treasury," explains in simple terms the connection between the Corsair attacks and the new taxes. It shows how the Theban council's ignorance of the sea is costing every farmer and artisan in the kingdom. Another, Our Wooden Wall, compares the slow, clumsy ships of the Misri navy with the fast, modern designs used by the Venetians and Genoese, copies of whose ship plans the society has acquired. It argues that prayer is no defense against a catapult. These pamphlets, printed in the hundreds and distributed secretly by the society's members along the Nile, are a political earthquake. For the first time, the common people are given a rational explanation for their suffering, an alternative to the official pronouncements from Thebes, which blame the crisis on a testing of the faith. The pamphlets introduce a new way of thinking about the world, a way based on evidence, reason, and practical solutions. The crisis of the Red Sea Corsairs is doing more than just bankrupting the state. It is exposing the fundamental flaw of the Thebaid ascendancy. The kingdom's rigid, faith-based isolationism has made it strong against the threats of the past, but it has made it fatally brittle in the face of the new. The Corsairs are not just sinking ships. They are sinking the entire ideological foundation of the monastic state. The silent schism, which for decades was a matter of secret debates in Alexandria, is about to be forced out into the open. The pendulum is not just swinging. It is being violently pulled by forces that the monks in Thebes cannot comprehend and can no longer control. Thebes is a city in denial. The pamphlets from Alexandria are publicly burned, and their anonymous author is condemned from the pulpit of every church as a heretic and a tool of the Saracens. The Apauros, a pious but unimaginative man named Benjamin, orders a kingdom-wide week of fasting and prayer to beseech God to smite the Corsairs from the sea. The fast is held, the prayers are offered, and the Corsairs respond by capturing a treasure ship carrying a year's worth of ivory from the Nubian kingdom, a devastating blow to both allied monarchies. The crisis reaches a breaking point. The Nubian archers on the Sinai frontier, their pay now 6 months in arrears, threaten to abandon their posts and return home. King David of Makuria sends an angry message to Thebes, warning that the Pact of the Two Lions is on the verge of collapse. The monastic bureaucracy, for centuries a model of efficiency, begins to fray as monks, unpaid and demoralized, abandon their administrative posts. The house of God is falling down. Within the council of abbots, a bitter factional dispute erupts. The hardliners, the spiritual heirs of the Thebaid ascendancy, demand an even greater turn towards faith. The expulsion of all foreign merchants, a full severing of ties with the outside world, a purge of the Alexandrian rationalists. They argue that the crisis is a punishment from God for the kingdom's laxity. But a new faction has been quietly growing, centered around the abbot Paphnutius, the aged architect of the Nubian alliance. For a century, he has been a voice of pragmatism, and now, in the kingdom's darkest hour, his arguments gain traction. He stands before the council, his voice trembling with age, but firm with conviction. "We have prayed. We have fasted," he declares, gesturing towards a map of the Red Sea. "But God gave us a mind to reason with, and he gave the Franks a skill for war we do not possess. Our piety is our strength, but our pride has become our weakness. We cannot see a solution to our troubles because we refuse to look for one outside our own walls. We are dying of pride." Paphnutius makes a proposal that is, to the hardliners, the ultimate blasphemy. He suggests hiring the Franks. The idea is met with stunned silence, then a torrent of outrage. The Peregrini, the violent, schismatic, greedy barbarians who follow the Pope of Rome, the very people whose presence spurred the Nubian alliance in the first place. To invite them into the heart of the kingdom, to pay them to fight Misr's battles, it is an admission of failure, a betrayal of their sacred independence. But Paphnutius has been secretly corresponding with Heron and the Logos Society in Alexandria. He is not a rationalist himself, but he recognizes the truth in their pamphlets. He has Heron's detailed analysis of Frankish military techniques, particularly their naval prowess and their expertise in siege warfare against fortified coastal strongholds, exactly the skills needed to eradicate the Corsair bases. He has also received, through Alexandrian channels, quiet feelers from a man named Jean de Joinville, the seneschal of the rump kingdom of Jerusalem in Acre. The Frankish kingdom is a shadow of its former self, surrounded by Mamluk enemies. Its nobles are land-poor but battle-hardened. They are, in essence, the most formidable mercenary army in the world, desperate for coin and a righteous cause. Joinville has hinted that for a price, the Knights of Outremer would be willing to undertake a holy campaign on behalf of their Coptic brethren against the Saracen Corsairs. The debate in the Theban council rages for weeks. The kingdom teeters on the brink of civil war, but with every passing day, another ship is lost, the treasury empties further, and the news from the frontiers grows more dire. Finally, with the kingdom facing total collapse, the pragmatic faction wins. A wafer-thin majority of the council votes to empower Paphnutius to open formal negotiations. A Misri delegation, led by Paphnutius, and accompanied by Heron of Alexandria as a technical advisor, travels to Acre. The city is a strange and vibrant bastion of the West in the East. French is the language of the streets. Catholic cathedrals stand beside ancient Orthodox churches, and the harbour is a forest of masts flying the banners of Venice, Genoa, and Pisa. The meeting with Jean de Joinville and the barons of the Kingdom of Jerusalem is a tense, surreal affair. The Franks, for their part, can barely conceal their astonishment. For generations, they have viewed the Copts as effete, cowardly heretics. Now, these heretics are here, cap in hand, offering a mountain of gold for their services. Paphnutius, speaking through an interpreter, lays out the terms. Misr will pay for the levying of a force of 500 Frankish knights, 1,000 men-at-arms, and a fleet of 20 war galleys, crewed by Genoese sailors in the Franks' employ. They will be given a free hand to attack and destroy every known Beja Corsair base along the Red Sea coast. The price is staggering. The Franks demand a sum of gold that requires emptying the last reserves from the treasuries of the great monasteries. But Misr has no choice. The contract is signed. It becomes known as the Peregrini contract. 6 months later, a sight is seen in the Red Sea that has not been witnessed in 1,000 years. A fleet of Western-style war galleys, their long oars rising and falling in perfect rhythm, rows south from the port of Clysma. On their decks stand Frankish knights, their kite shields painted with the crosses of their homelands, their squires polishing their great helms. They are guided by Misri pilots and accompanied by supply ships carrying Nubian archers. At the fleet's head is a formidable French knight named Guillaume de Sonnac, a veteran of a dozen campaigns against the Saracens. The campaign that follows is a whirlwind of methodical brutality. The Beja Corsairs, accustomed to fighting slow-moving merchant dhows, are completely unprepared for the professional, amphibious assault of the Franks. The war galleys corner the Beja ships in their hidden anchorages. The knights, wading ashore in full armour, storm the fortified coastal towns. Their expertise in siegecraft, honed by centuries of castle warfare, is overwhelming. They build trebuchets on the beaches to smash the walls of Suakin. They use scaling ladders to take the citadel at Massawa. The war is vicious and short. Within a year, the Corsair network is annihilated. The power of the Beja is broken. The Red Sea is once again safe for Misri commerce. The kingdom is saved from the brink of collapse. But the victory comes at a terrible price, one not measured in gold. The Frankish mercenaries, having fulfilled their contract, do not simply disappear. They have seen the wealth of Misr firsthand. They have established a foothold. They linger in Alexandria, spending their pay, their swaggering, violent presence, a source of constant friction in the pious city. Guillaume de Sonnac, the victorious commander, proves to be a shrewd politician as well as a soldier. He does not demand land or titles. He simply makes it known to the council in Thebes that his men are available for further contracts. The Kingdom of Misr has solved its external problem by creating a new internal one. It has become dependent on foreign, schismatic mercenaries for its own security. The holy soldiers, the once proud warrior monks of Misr, have been shown up as inadequate. The pristine, self-sufficient kingdom has been irrevocably compromised. The Logos Society in Alexandria, their pragmatic advice vindicated, finds their influence growing. They become the crucial intermediaries between the Theban court and the Frankish commanders, the only ones who can speak the language of both faith and cold, hard steel. The pendulum has swung violently. In a desperate attempt to save itself, the most isolationist, theocratic state in the world has invited a Trojan horse of foreign soldiers and foreign ideas within its walls. The slow, secret schism between Thebes and Alexandria is over. The conflict is now out in the open, and its arbiters are not monks and scholars, but French knights with swords for hire. The victory against the Corsairs is celebrated in Thebes with solemn thanksgiving services. The Red Sea trade routes reopen, and a torrent of wealth, pent up for a generation, floods back into the kingdom. The state treasury is refilled. The monasteries receive their back pay. The Nubian alliance is restored to financial health. On the surface, it appears the crisis is over, and the old order has been restored. But this is a dangerous illusion. The gold that flows into Misr no longer truly belongs to it. The Peregrini contract was not financed by the dusty gold hoards in the monastic cellars alone. That was merely the down payment. To fund the sustained year-long campaign, Abbot Paphnutius and Heron, in their desperation, had to seek credit. And in the 13th century Mediterranean, credit meant one thing: the Italian maritime republics. Specifically, it meant the Bank of St. George in Genoa and the private banking families of Venice. These were the institutions that had financed the Frankish states for 2 centuries. They understood the business of war. Heron, through his contacts in the Alexandrian merchant community, had brokered the deal. Venetian bankers, smelling a historic opportunity, advanced the Kingdom of Misr a colossal loan, using the next 10 years of customs revenues from the Red Sea ports as collateral. The Frankish commander, Guillaume de Sonnac, was merely the sword arm. The Venetian bankers were the calculating mind behind the operation. Now, the bill has come due. The mercenaries have been paid their bonuses, but the Venetian loan, with its punishing interest, hangs over the kingdom like a shroud. Year after year, the bulk of the profits from the spice and silk trade flows directly from the Misri customs houses into the coffers of Venetian banking families. The kingdom has been saved from the Corsairs only to be captured by its creditors. Misr has won the war, but Venice is winning the peace. This new reality is felt most acutely in Alexandria. The city is transformed. It is no longer a quiet peripheral port. It is the nexus of Venetian power in the east. The old Venetian fondaco, the small trading post, expands into a massive, fortified quarter, a city within a city, governed by its own laws and policed by its own soldiers. The Venetian bailo, or consul, becomes one of the most powerful men in Misr, wielding more practical influence than any 10 abbots from the Theban council. The Venetians are not content to simply collect their loan payments. They are masters of leverage. They see a kingdom with a moribund economy, run by monks who are brilliant at theology but infants in the world of commerce. They see a nation of immense potential being deliberately stifled, and they see their opportunity to change that for their own benefit. A delegation from Venice, led by the bailo himself, a sharp, unsentimental nobleman named Marco Ziani, travels to Thebes. They do not come asking for their money. They come offering a solution. Ziani lays out a proposal to the Apauros and the Council of Abbots. He speaks with the smooth, confident logic of a banker who knows his client is bankrupt. Your kingdom is drowning in a sea of gold, yet you die of thirst. Ziani explains, using a parable he knows the monks will understand. You have the most valuable trade route on earth, but you treat it like a monastery garden, to be tended but not expanded. Your wealth is stagnant. It does not grow. It does not work for you. His proposal is radical. In exchange for the complete forgiveness of Misr's remaining debt, the Venetian Republic asks for a single concession: the declaration of Alexandria as a free trade port, a Porto Franco. All Venetian goods would be exempt from tariffs. Venetian merchants would be allowed to live, trade, and own property anywhere in the city, not just in their fortified quarter. Misri artisans would be free to enter into contracts and partnerships with Venetian businesses. The city's port would be expanded and modernized under Venetian supervision and with Venetian capital. To the hardline abbots, this is the devil's bargain. It is an invitation for the final, complete corruption of the kingdom. It would turn the last remnant of the holy city of St. Mark into a Frankish bazaar, a nest of greed and foreign influence. But the pragmatic faction, now led by Heron of Alexandria, who has been granted a permanent seat on the council as the secular comptroller, sees the cold, hard logic. The debt is crippling them. It is a chain that will keep Misr a Venetian vassal for 100 years. Forgiving the debt in one stroke would restore the kingdom's sovereignty. And Heron, a man of the Logos society, is not afraid of trade or foreign ideas. He sees an opportunity not for corruption, but for revitalization. He imagines Alexandria reawakened, its people learning the advanced commercial and manufacturing techniques of the Italians, its wealth being invested and grown rather than simply hoarded. The debate is even more ferocious than the one over the Peregrini contract. It is a battle for the economic soul of the nation. But the reality of the debt is undeniable. With Heron's powerful advocacy and the quiet, menacing presence of Guillaume de Sonnac's mercenaries, who are now effectively the Venetian bank's private enforcement army, the council caves, the Venetian bargain is struck. The effect on Alexandria is instantaneous and explosive. It is like opening the floodgates of a dam. Venetian capital pours into the city. The harbour is dredged. New piers and warehouses are built. Entire districts are revitalized. But it is more than just an economic boom. It is a cultural revolution. Venetian artisans arrive, bringing with them new techniques in glassmaking, shipbuilding, and textile weaving. Banking houses are established, introducing concepts like letters of credit and double-entry bookkeeping, which revolutionize Misri commerce. A new class of Coptic entrepreneurs emerges, men who partner with the Venetians, adopting their methods and their secular, profit-driven worldview. They build new villas, not in the old Coptic style, but in the Gothic Byzantine fashion of Venice. They send their sons to be educated not in the monasteries of Thebes, but in the counting houses of the Rialto. The Logos Society, once a secret, persecuted sect, comes out into the open. Their members are the natural intermediaries between the old Misri world and the new Venetian one. Their knowledge of foreign languages, of science, of law, is now in high demand. Their printing press, once a tool of subversion, is now used to print commercial contracts, shipping manifests, and translations of Italian works on navigation and finance. The Venetian bargain has saved the kingdom from bankruptcy, but it has shattered the Thebaid ascendancy forever. The power of the monastic council in Thebes, while still absolute in theory, begins to drain away. Real power, economic, cultural, and increasingly, political is coalescing in Alexandria, in the hands of a new, hybrid Coptic Venetian merchant class, backed by the intellectual framework of the Logos Society and the swords of the Frankish mercenaries. The old, inward-looking, faith-based kingdom is being forcibly and rapidly transformed into a new, outward-looking, commerce-based state. The pendulum is not just swinging, it has been given a mighty shove. The long, slow descent from the peak of faith has just become a terrifyingly fast, uncontrolled plunge towards a new extreme. The transformation of Alexandria is a source of wonder to the world and a source of horror to the heartland of Misr. From the battlements of the desert monasteries, the abbots look north and see not a revitalized kingdom, but the rise of a new Sodom. They hear tales of Alexandrian merchants living in palaces of unheard-of luxury, of their wives dressing in Venetian silks, of their sons speaking Italian more fluently than Coptic. They hear of the public teaching of Greek philosophy, of the construction of a secular university funded by merchant gold, of usury, the lending of money at interest, an abomination in scripture being practiced openly in the new banks. The Venetian bargain has split the kingdom in two. It is no longer a silent schism of ideas. It is a visible chasm of culture, wealth, and power. Alexandria is a city of explosive growth, of frantic energy, of chaotic, hybrid culture. Thebes remains a city of silent, stone-faced piety, a living museum of a faith and a way of life that is rapidly becoming obsolete. The wealth of the reopened Red Sea trade flows through the kingdom, but it no longer sticks to Thebes. It pools in Alexandria, in the hands of the new merchant class and their Venetian partners. The monastic state, which once controlled all the nation's wealth, is now reduced to living off a fixed stipend, negotiated with the secular comptroller, Heron. They have become pensioners in their own kingdom. Resentment, deep and bitter, festers in the Thebaid. It is fanned by the fiery sermons of the hardline abbots, who preach that a cancerous rot has infected the kingdom's soul. They call the Alexandrians the Italikos Koptos, the Italian Copts, a term of profound contempt. They preach that the mercenaries, the cross-worshipping dogs of the Latins, are an army of occupation. They call for a great purification, a holy uprising to cast out the foreigners and their Coptic collaborators and restore the sacred rule of the saints. The spark that ignites the fire is, ironically, an act of faith. The Apouros dies, and the council of abbots meets in Thebes to elect his successor. They choose the most fanatical of the hardliners, a firebrand monk named Damien. His first act is to issue an edict from Thebes. He declares the Venetian bargain null and void as an offence against God. He excommunicates Heron and the entire leadership of the Logos Society. He revokes the charter of the Free Port of Alexandria and orders the expulsion of all foreign merchants and soldiers from the sacred soil of Misr. In Alexandria, the edict is met with derision, then fury. The new merchant elite, organized into a powerful body called the Alexandrian League, sees it as a declaration of war. Their entire world, their wealth, their power, their modern way of life, is threatened with annihilation. Heron, no longer just a scholar but a seasoned political operator, knows that the time for compromise is over. The choice is simple: submit to theocratic oblivion or fight. he gathers the leaders of the League in the newly built Chamber of Commerce, a magnificent hall decorated not with icons, but with maps of the world and frescoes celebrating maritime trade. With him are Marco Ziani, the Venetian bailo, and Guillaume de Sonnac, the commander of the Frankish mercenaries. This is the new trinity of power in Misr. The monks have a god and an army of peasants. Heron tells the assembled merchants, "We have logic, gold, and a professional army that has never known defeat. They wish to drag us back into a past of fearful piety. We will offer Misr a future of prosperity and enlightenment, but we must seize it." The civil war begins. It is a brutal, swift, and utterly one-sided conflict. Appa-Oros Damian calls for a holy crusade. From across Upper Egypt, a vast peasant army, the legend to Theu, or Legion of God, assembles. They are armed with farm implements, ancient swords, and a burning fanatical faith. They march north under the banners of the Desert Saints, a medieval horde intent on purifying the modern city. Against them marches the army of the Alexandrian League. It is a smaller but infinitely more lethal force. At its core are the 500 Frankish heavy knights under de Sonnac, a wall of steel and fury. They are supported by 10,000 professional Misri soldiers, retrained and re-equipped by the Franks, and a contingent of elite Nubian archers whose king has sided with the League, tempted by Alexandrian gold and promises of a modernized army. The League's greatest advantage, however, is its artillery cannons cast in Venetian foundries, a new technology that the monks of Thebes have never seen and cannot comprehend. The two armies meet at a crossing of the Nile, south of the ancient capital of Memphis. The Legion of God is a vast, chanting sea of humanity, their courage absolute. The Battle of the Two Niles, as it becomes known, is not a battle. It is a massacre. The League's cannons tear bloody holes in the dense peasant ranks. The Nubian archers fire disciplined volleys that blot out the Sunday. And then, de Sonnac's knights charge. The impact is apocalyptic. The peasant army, which has never faced a coordinated heavy cavalry charge, breaks, scatters, and is slaughtered in the thousands. The war is over in a single day. The road to Thebes is open. The League's army marches into the holy capital unopposed. There is no sack, no massacre. Heron and his allies are too politically astute for that. They understand that they need to control the symbols of the old faith, not destroy them. Appa-Oros Damian and the most extreme of the hardline abbots are arrested and quietly exiled to a remote monastery on the Red Sea coast. A new, more compliant Appa-Oros is elected, a man who understands the new realities of power. The great monastic treasuries are seized and placed under the control of the new state bank in Alexandria. The pendulum has not just swung, it has shattered its old anchor point. The Thebaid Ascendancy is dead, its ideology and its armies broken in a single bloody afternoon. The violent civil war has purged the old order, clearing the way for a radical restructuring of the kingdom. The inward-looking, faith-driven, isolationist state is gone. In its place, a new entity is about to be born from the crucible of war, one forged from Coptic ambition, Venetian capital, and Frankish steel. Misr has been torn down to its foundations. Now, the victors, the merchants, the scholars, and the soldiers of Alexandria will have to build it anew. In the aftermath of the civil war, the victors gather in Alexandria to build a new state from the ruins of the old. The men of the Alexandrian League Heron, the engineer, the great Coptic merchant families, the senior fellows of the Logos Society, know they are walking a razor's edge. They have won a total military victory, but they rule a nation whose rural heartland is sullen, defeated, and deeply suspicious. of its new masters. To simply abolish the old theocracy would be to invite a century of simmering rebellion. To restore it would be to negate their own revolution. The solution they devise is a masterpiece of political pragmatism, a constitution designed to preserve the form of the old while utterly transforming its substance. The new state is to be called the Syndicate of Misr and Alexandria, a name that immediately signals a division of power. It will be an empire of two thrones. The first throne remains in Thebes. The office of the Apa Uros is preserved, as is the Council of Abbots. The Patriarch of Alexandria also retains his spiritual authority. Thebes is to remain the religious and ceremonial capital of the nation. The Apa Uros will continue to be the face of the kingdom to its devout masses, the symbol of its unbroken, ancient faith. He will preside over the great festivals, bless the harvest, and anoint the commanders of the army. He will retain all the trappings of power, but none of its actual levers. His new constitutionally defined role is to be the spiritual guardian of the nation, a living icon. The second throne is established in Alexandria. It is a new office, deliberately secular, with a title drawn from the city's Hellenistic past, the Archon. The Archon is to be the chief executive of the state, elected for a 10-year term not by monks, but by a grand council composed of the 100 wealthiest merchant families, the senior members of the Logos Society, and representatives from the Kingdom of Nubia and the mercenary command. The Archon controls the treasury, the army, all foreign policy, and all matters of trade and law. He is the engine of the state. The Apa Uros is its soul. Heron is, inevitably, elected as the first Archon. His first acts are to cement the new reality. Thebes is demilitarized, its old garrisons disbanded. The only armed force in the kingdom is the new national army, headquartered in Alexandria, commanded by Guillaume de Sonnac, who is granted the new title of strategos for life and funded directly by the Archon's treasury. The great monastic landholdings are not seized, but they are subjected to heavy taxation, the revenue from which is used to fund the new secular university and a massive program of infrastructure development, new roads, canals, and harbour improvements. This is the empire of the two thrones. It is a brilliant, cynical compromise. To the peasants of the Thebaid, their world remains familiar. They still see a Holy Father ruling from the sacred capital. But in the commercial cities and along the trade routes, the new reality is stark. The state is run by secular bureaucrats from the Logos Society, according to rational principles of efficiency and profit. Justice is dispensed not by priests, but by trained magistrates in secular courts. The language of government is no longer the liturgical Coptic of the monasteries, but the crisp international Greek of Alexandrian commerce. The new syndicate immediately turns its focus outward. The old kingdom was a fortress, obsessed with defense. The new one is a trading house, obsessed with expansion. Heron and the Grand Council know that their prosperity depends on the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. Their primary policy goal is to secure and dominate this trade route absolutely. This requires a new kind of military. The old army of holy soldiers was an infantry force designed to defend the Sinai. The new syndicate army is built around two pillars. The Frankish led heavy cavalry for shock action and a vastly expanded and modernized navy. The shipyards of Alexandria, now advised by the best shipwrights from Venice and Genoa, begin to produce a new class of warship. It is a hybrid vessel, combining the square-rigged sails and high castles of a European carrack with the sleek hull and maneuverability of an Arab doe, and armed with rows of cannons. These Alexandrian galleons are floating fortresses designed to dominate the waters of the Red Sea and beyond. The relationship with Venice is subtly renegotiated. Misr is no longer a desperate debtor, but a dynamic and powerful partner. Heron uses the kingdom's vast leverage, its absolute control over the European spice supply, to demand better terms. The free port status of Alexandria is confirmed, but it is now reciprocal. Misri merchants are granted their own fortified quarter in Venice, the Fondaco dei Copti. The Syndicate establishes its own consulates and trading posts across the Mediterranean, competing directly with the Venetians who taught them the game. The Frankish mercenaries are professionalized. They are no longer a foreign company for hire, but the permanent, elite core of the Syndicate army. De Sonac and his senior knights are granted estates in the fertile Nile delta and Coptic wives from the new merchant aristocracy. Over a generation, they begin to assimilate. Their children are raised speaking Greek and Coptic as well as French. They are still culturally distinct, a military caste known as the Franco-Coptos, but their loyalty is now sworn to the Archon of Alexandria, not to a distant king in Paris or a beleaguered baron in Acre. They are the Syndicate's Praetorian Guard, the ultimate guarantee that the monks of Thebes will never again challenge the merchants of Alexandria. You stand on the newly expanded quays of Alexandria's harbour. The city is now, without question, the richest in the world. The wealth pouring in from the east is being invested, not hoarded. New industries are sprouting. Textile factories using Misri cotton and Italian looms. Cannon foundries, vast publishing houses using the Logos Society's advanced printing presses. The intellectual life is explosive. The university is a magnet for scholars from across the known world. Persian mathematicians, Byzantine historians, and Andalusian physicians debate in its halls. It is the rebirth of the ancient museum. The Syndicate is a society of stark, managed contradictions. It is a secular, commercial republic in all but name, yet it is ruled under the watchful, symbolic gaze of a powerless monk king. It is a proudly Coptic nation, yet its military elite is of Frankish descent, and its economic model is Venetian. It has embraced radical change and rationalism, yet it has done so by carefully preserving the ancient symbols of its faith. Heron has not just built a new state, he has built a new kind of civilization, a hybrid entity born from the violent collision of East and West, faith and reason. The pendulum, having swung to the extreme of pure faith, has now reached the opposite extreme of pure, calculated pragmatism. The kingdom of the saints is dead. Long live the empire of the merchants. The Syndicate's new outward gaze falls immediately and intensely upon the south. For the first Archon, Heron, and the merchant princes of the Grand Council, the logic is inescapable. Alexandria's prosperity, the very foundation of their power, depends on the uninterrupted flow of goods from the Indian Ocean. For centuries, this trade was conducted through a long, fragile chain of intermediaries: Gujarati sailors, Yemeni merchants, Bedouin caravaneers. Each link in the chain added cost and risk. The new rulers of Misr, with their Venetian-taught obsession with efficiency and vertical integration, see this system not as a timeless tradition, but as a problem to be solved. They do not want to simply tax the trade, they want to own it. This ambition leads them to a forgotten Christian kingdom, an ancient ally who has fallen into myth and isolation. The connection between the Coptic Church of Misr and the Ethiopian Church of Axum is ancient and profound. For 1,000 years, the head of the Ethiopian Church, the Abuna, has been a Coptic monk appointed and sent from Alexandria. But for the last 300 years of Misri isolationism, this connection had become a mere formality. Contact was sporadic, the journey perilous. The mountain kingdom had turned inward, fighting for its survival against encroaching Islamic emirates on the coast and pagan peoples in the south. Archon Heron sees a historic opportunity. Axum is a Christian kingdom, a natural ally. It sits on a high plateau overlooking the Horn of Africa, the strategic key to the mouth of the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean trade lanes. Its soldiers are renowned for their toughness, and it is rumoured to be a land of fabulous wealth in gold and ivory. a grand embassy is dispatched from Alexandria. It does not travel by the slow, dangerous land route through Nubia. It sails. A squadron of the new Alexandrian galleons, their cannons gleaming, sails down the Red Sea. A projection of power Misr has not attempted in its entire history. They are carrying not just diplomats and priests, but also military advisors from the Franco-Coptos, engineers from the Logos Society, and bankers from the new Alexandrian houses. They arrive at the ancient Axumite port of Adulis, which has long been in decline, harassed by local sultanates. The arrival of the galleons is a cataclysmic event. Within days, the Synarchate forces smash the local pirate bases and declare the port under the benevolent protection of the Archon. From Adulis, the embassy begins the long, arduous trek up into the Ethiopian highlands. They find a kingdom that is like a fossil from a lost world. In the cool, thin air of the mountains, they find churches carved directly from the living rock, monasteries that hold libraries of texts unseen in the north for centuries, and a proud, feudal society of warriors and priests. The Nagus, the emperor of Axum, is a pious and belly-guided ruler, his kingdom an isolated Christian island in a hostile sea. The Negus, Zara Jacob, receives the delegation with a mixture of awe and suspicion. They are his co-religionists, sent by his spiritual father, the Patriarch, but they are also unlike any Copts he has ever seen. They are accompanied by pale-faced Frankish warriors and speak of finance and naval logistics as much as they speak of God. Heron's envoys lay out their proposal. It is a far more ambitious version of the old pact of the two lions. The Synarchate will provide Axum with a permanent corps of Franco-Coptic military trainers to modernize its army. It will provide a permanent naval squadron to guarantee the security of the coast. And it will re-establish the regular appointment of the Abuna, flooding the kingdom with new priests' books and the revitalized theology of the now enlightened Alexandrian Church. In return, Axum must grant the Synarchate exclusive trading rights. All the goods of the interior, the gold, the ivory, the coffee beans that grow wild on the mountainsides, will be sold only to the Synarchate state-sponsored trading company. Axum will become the southern anchor of a great Coptic commercial empire, a partner in a venture that will dominate the trade of half the world. For Zara Jacob, the offer is irresistible. It is a lifeline, a promise of deliverance from centuries of isolation and siege. He accepts. The Axumite revival is swift and transformative. The Synarchate's intervention is like a massive injection of capital, technology, and military power into the ancient kingdom. The modernized Axumite army, now armed with crossbows and trained in Frankish tactics, pushes back the surrounding sultanates, securing the kingdom's borders for the first time in centuries. The port of Adulis, renamed Port Heron, becomes a bustling fortified city, a sister to Alexandria. Synarchate merchants, protected by the navy, establish a network of trading posts down the Swahili coast of East Africa, tapping into the goldfields of Zimbabwe and the markets of Mozambique. A new Coptic bloc is born. It is not a quiet, defensive pact like the old Nubian alliance. It is a dynamic, aggressive commercial and military confederation, stretching from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean. It controls the Nile, the Red Sea, and now the sea lanes of East Africa. The Synarchate of Misr and Alexandria is no longer just a kingdom or an empire. It is a thalassocracy, a maritime superpower. This new power bloc fundamentally alters the balance of power in the region. The Mamluk Sultanate in Cairo, which in our timeline dominated the region, is now outflanked and economically strangled. A second-rate power confined to Syria and the Hejaz. The Sultanate of the Maghreb finds its eastern ambitions permanently checked. Most significantly, when the first Portuguese ships, under Vasco da Gama, round the Cape of Good Hope in the late 15th century, seeking a direct route to the spices of India, they do not find a collection of squabbling, minor sultanates on the East African coast. Instead, they find a chain of fortified Synarchate trading posts, defended by professional soldiers and powerful cannon-armed galleons. They find a vast, organized, and technologically advanced Christian empire that already controls the prize they seek. They are not daring explorers breaking a monopoly. They are latecomers attempting to muscle in on a trade network far older and more powerful than their own. The age of European colonial dominance in the Indian Ocean does not begin. Instead, a long, grinding commercial and naval rivalry is initiated between the powers of the Atlantic and the new superpower of the Nile and Red Sea. The world of global trade will have two poles, not one. In the 15th and 16th centuries, Alexandria becomes what it was always destined to be, the center of the world. It is the hinge between East and West, the funnel through which the wealth of Asia pours into Europe, and the lens through which the ideas of Europe are focused upon the East. The Synarchate is at its zenith, a global superpower whose influence is felt from the mines of Zimbabwe to the banking houses of Florence. The city of Alexandria is the incandescent heart of this empire, a metropolis that dwarfs any other on Earth in wealth, size, and complexity. This is the era of the School of the World. The name refers not just to the city's famous university, but to the entire urban environment. To walk the streets of Alexandria is to receive an education in the sheer, bewildering variety of human civilization. The city's population swells to over 1 million, a chaotic, vibrant, and sometimes violent melting pot of peoples and cultures. In the Great Bazaar, you can see a Franco-Coptic knight, his French accent softened by generations in the Delta, haggling with a Gujarati merchant over the price of pepper. You can see a Nubian diplomat in his white robes discussing politics with a Venetian consul. You see Axumite priests with their ornate silver crosses debating theology with Greek scholars freshly arrived from the fallen city of Constantinople. You see Persian artists, Jewish physicians, Malian gold traders, and the first bewildered-looking sailors from the distant northern kingdoms of Portugal and Castile. The official languages of the Synarchate are Greek and Coptic, but the language of the street is a unique patois, a Frankish Arabic, spiced with Italian, Nubian, and a dozen other tongues. This cultural fusion gives birth to an explosion of creativity. The art of the Synarchate is a stunning synthesis. In the newly commissioned murals for the Archon's palace, you see the elongated spiritual figures of Coptic tradition, but they are rendered with Venetian techniques of perspective and shading. They are set against architectural backgrounds drawn from Persian miniatures, and their robes are decorated with geometric patterns from Nubian pottery. It is an art form that is entirely new, a visual representation of the city's hybrid soul. The intellectual life of the city, driven by the Logos Society, which is now the state's official administrative and educational body, is unparalleled. The great University of Alexandria has absorbed the scholars and libraries of Constantinople, which, without the long support of Egyptian grain and wealth, fell to the Turks a century earlier than in our timeline. The university is a repository of all human knowledge. Scholars work on translating Sanskrit medical texts, on combining Greek geometry with Arabic algebra, on developing new navigational instruments that merge the star charts of Persian sailors with the Portolan maps of the Genoese. This syncretism produces breathtaking advances. Synarchate physicians, combining the anatomical knowledge of the West with the pharmacological expertise of India, pioneer new surgical techniques and develop treatments for diseases that are still scourges in Europe. Synarchate engineers, merging Roman principles of hydraulics with Nilotic experience in canal building, create irrigation systems that turn vast new swathes of the desert green. But this golden age is built on a foundation of managed tensions. The society is stratified into distinct, often competing, groups. At the top is the Archon and the Grand Council, the Italo-Coptic merchant aristocracy. They are the masters of the game. Beneath them is the military caste, the Franco-Coptos, who maintain their own distinct identity, their own French-speaking circles, and their own code of honor. They are loyal to the state, but they view the merchants with a warrior's contempt for bean counters. The Logos society forms the vast administrative and intellectual class, the bureaucrats and scholars who make the empire run. They see themselves as the true guardians of the Syndicatate's rationalist ideals. And then there are the foreigners, the Venetians, Genoese, and now Portuguese and Spanish, who live in their own fortified quarters, essential to the empire's economy but never fully trusted. And beneath it all is the great mass of the native Misri population, the Coptic-speaking peasants and urban poor. They are the silent majority. They are richer than their ancestors ever were, their lives improved by the new stability and technology. But they are also culturally alienated. The high culture of Alexandria is not their culture. The language of power is not their language. They cling to the old ways, to the rituals of the Theban church, to the symbolic authority of the Upper Uros. They watch the glittering foreign-inflected world of their masters, with a mixture of awe and deep-seated resentment. This complex, vibrant, and dangerously fractured society is held together by one thing: money. The profits from the global trade are so immense that they lubricate all the points of friction. The merchants get rich, the soldiers are well paid, the bureaucrats have their sinecures, and enough wealth trickles down to the masses in the form of public works and subsidized bread to keep them quiescent. The Syndicate has solved the problem of social cohesion with a simple, brutal equation: prosperity equals stability. But in the process, the core identity of the nation has become blurred. What does it mean to be a citizen of the Syndicate? Is it to be a Copt, a follower of the ancient faith of St. Mark? Is it to be a speaker of Greek, an heir to the rationalist traditions of ancient Alexandria? Is it to be a soldier in the Frankish mould, or a merchant in the Venetian one? The answer is all and none of the above. The old, simple, powerful identity of the Kingdom of Saints has been traded for a new, complex, and fragile identity of a cosmopolitan empire. You are standing in the Great Hall of the university, looking at a new map of the world being painted on the wall. It is the most accurate map ever created, compiled from the reports of Sinarchic captains, Venetian explorers, and Arab geographers. For the first time, the Americas, the New World, discovered by Castilian sailors in the pay of the Portuguese, are shown, albeit as a vague, uncertain coastline. The world has been revealed in its entirety, and Alexandria sits at its absolute center. An old scholar from the Logos Society stands beside you, looking at the map with a troubled expression. "We have inherited the world," he says, his voice a low whisper. "We have mastered the science of navigation, of commerce, of governance. We are the richest and wisest empire under the Sunday." He pauses, then traces the outline of the Nile, from the Great Sea to the highlands of Ethiopia, the traditional heartland of his people. "But I fear," he says, "that in gaining the world, we have lost ourselves." His words are a chilling prophecy. The pendulum, having reached the extreme of pure, rational, materialistic pragmatism, has created a world of dazzling brilliance. But its success has also created a society that has no clear soul, no unifying principle beyond the acquisition of wealth. It is a magnificent, intricate machine, but it may have forgotten its own purpose. The machine is perfect. In the late 16th century, the Synarchate of Misr and Alexandria runs with the predictable precision of a clockwork universe. The galleons sail from Port Heron on the summer monsoon, their holds filled with Nubian gold and Axumite ivory. They return from India on the winter monsoon, laden with pepper, cinnamon, and fine calico. The caravans cross the Sinai, their goods destined for the eager markets of Europe. In Alexandria, the great banking houses, led by the Bank of the Logos, finance these voyages with complex instruments, letters of credit, maritime insurance, and shares in joint stock companies. The wealth of the world flows through Alexandria, and the machine takes its share, growing richer, larger, and more complex with every passing year. The Archon of the day, a man named Stephanos, is a product of this perfect system. A descendant of Heron, he is a brilliant economist, a master of logistics, a man who can think in shiploads and percentages. He has spent his entire life inside the machine, optimizing it, refining it. He has come to believe, as has the entire ruling class of the Synarchate, that the machine is infallible. They have solved the ancient problems of famine, invasion, and civil strife with a single, elegant solution: a globalized commercial system that generates limitless prosperity. They have created a paradise of pragmatism. The first sign of the unseen flaw appears not in the counting houses or on the high seas, but in the muddy fields of the Nile Delta. It is a new kind of rust, a reddish-brown powder that appears on the leaves of the wheat just before the harvest. It spreads with terrifying speed, carried on the wind from field to field. Within a month, nearly a third of the Delta's wheat harvest, the breadbasket of the empire, is a withered ruin. It is a crop blight, a new, virulent strain of fungus. In the old Kingdom of Misr, it would have been a catastrophe, but a familiar one. It would have meant hunger, fasting, and prayer. The kingdom would have tightened its belt, drawn on its reserves, and endured its social structure, built on shared faith and hardship, remaining intact. But the Synarchate is no longer the old kingdom. Its structure is not built on faith, but on credit. The blight triggers the first link in a catastrophic chain reaction. The Archon and the Grand Council, to prevent famine and bread riots in the cities, are forced to import vast quantities of grain from their rivals in the Black Sea and Sicily. They have to pay for it in gold, draining the state's bullion reserves at an alarming rate. This is the first shock. The second shock follows immediately. The great merchant houses of Alexandria, whose wealth is built on financing the spice trade, suddenly find their own assets collapsing. A significant portion of their capital is not held in gold, but is invested in land, the agricultural estates of the Delta. With the harvest failed, land values plummet. The asset that they thought was their safest hedge is now nearly worthless. Suddenly, the banks are facing a liquidity crisis. They have issued vast sums in letters of credit to finance the next season's voyages to India, all based on the assumption of their own capital reserves. But those reserves, tied to the value of land, have vanished. Panic begins to spread through the financial district. The Bank of the Logos, the central pillar of the entire system, announces it will have to tighten credit. This news, traveling with the speed of the fastest courier ships, hits the rest of the empire like a tsunami. In Port Heron, in Adulis, shipwrights halt construction on new galleons because the timber merchants, financed by Alexandrian banks, have had their credit lines cut. In the Axumite highlands, the Negus is furious. The price the Synarchate is offering for his coffee and gold has been slashed by half, as the Alexandrian buyers are now cash poor. On the Malabar coast, Gujarati suppliers, who have warehouses full of spices ready for the Synarchate's ships, are told that the fleet will be smaller this year, and that they will be paid not in gold, but in promissory notes, credit from a system that is visibly collapsing. The perfect machine grinds to a halt. The global supply chain, so intricate and efficient, is revealed to be terrifyingly fragile. Every part of the empire from the Franco-Coptic soldier waiting for his pay to the Venetian glassmaker waiting for soda ash from the Wadi el Natrun, is connected by invisible threads of credit. And now, those threads are snapping, one by one. For the first time in 2 centuries, the Syndicate faces a systemic economic depression. In Alexandria, the great merchant houses begin to fail. Unemployment skyrockets. The urban poor, their bread subsidies cut, begin to riot. The Archon, Stephanos, a man who understands balance sheets but not human desperation, responds with the only tool he has: force. He orders the Franco-Coptic garrisons to suppress the riots. The city, once the vibrant school of the world, becomes an armed camp, its citizens sullen and starving, its soldiers resentful and unpaid. The political consequences are devastating. The delicate balance of the 2 thrones shatters. The Apaoros in Thebes, a position long thought of as a quaint irrelevance, suddenly finds his voice again. The monks, who have been waiting in the wings for generations, emerge from their monasteries. They preach a simple, powerful sermon. This is God's judgment. The blight was not a natural disaster. It was a sign. The collapse of the banks is not a financial crisis. It is a moral one. The Syndicate, they thunder, built its house on the sand of greed and usury, and now the storm has come. Their message finds a desperate and receptive audience among the impoverished masses and the culturally alienated peasants. A new wave of fanatical religious revivalism sweeps through the rural heartland. This time, it is not a peasant horde armed with scythes. It is a deep, passive resistance. They refuse to pay the Archon's taxes. They refuse to cooperate with the secular authorities. They pledge their allegiance only to the Apaoros in Thebes. The Syndicate, the great global power, finds itself rotting from within. The Archon and the Grand Council are trapped. Their commercial empire is in ruins. Their military is stretched thin, putting down food riots in the cities. And their own heartland has risen against them in a silent rebellion of the soul. The Franco-Coptos, the ultimate guarantors of the system, face a crisis of loyalty. Are they the defenders of a corrupt, bankrupt merchant council? Or are they the protectors of the ancient Christian land of Misr? The unseen flaw was not in the economic models or the trade routes. It was in the foundation of the civilization itself. The pendulum, in its violent swing from the extreme of pure faith to the extreme of pure materialism, had created a magnificent but hollow structure. It had produced immense wealth, but it had forgotten how to produce meaning. It had conquered the world, but it had lost the loyalty of its own people. The Syndicate will not fall overnight. It is too big, too powerful. But the fatal wound has been struck. The crisis will spiral into decades of internal conflict, of secession attempts by the Axumites and Nubians, of increasing encroachment by the rival European powers who smell blood in the water. The Golden Age is over. The long, slow, agonizing decline has begun. The perfect machine has broken down, and its architects, the rational men of Alexandria, look on in horror, realizing that they have failed to account for the one variable that cannot be quantified on any ledger: the human soul. That was the arc we chose for this world. And in the end, the pendulum's own momentum becomes the engine of its destruction. The story of the Kingdom of Misr is not a simple tale of victory or defeat. It is a cautionary epic about the peril of extremes and the illusion of permanent solutions. The first extreme was born of righteous fire. The kingdom of saints, the house of gold and God, was a perfect fortress of faith. In its effort to purify itself, to protect itself from the chaos of the outside world, it achieved a serene, suffocating stability. It built walls not only against its enemies, but against new ideas, new questions, new ways of being. Its great trade-off was dynamism for piety. It chose the certainty of the monastery over the chaos of the marketplace. This choice gave it the strength to survive for centuries, but left it brittle, unimaginative, and incapable of adapting to a threat. The Red Sea Corsairs that its theology could not explain, and its military could not fight. Its perfection was its fatal flaw. The pendulum, when it fell with the fury of a repressed instinct. The syndicate of Misr and Alexandria was the mirror image of the kingdom it replaced. It embraced every idea the old kingdom had feared. It tore down the walls of the mind and the marketplace, welcoming the world in all its messy, profitable glory. It chose the cold logic of the balance sheet over the mysteries of faith. This new extreme created a golden age of unparalleled wealth and knowledge. But its trade-off was meaning for prosperity. It held its complex, fractured society together with the glue of money, and when the money stopped, it discovered it had no deeper loyalties to draw upon. In gaining the world, it had lost its own soul. Its perfection, too, was a fatal flaw. One kingdom died of pride, the other of greed. One from a poverty of imagination, the other from a poverty of spirit. Each was a violent reaction to the perceived failures of the other, a desperate flight to an opposite pole. But both failed to understand that a society, to endure, cannot be a fortress or a marketplace. It must be something more complex, a living thing that balances the needs of the spirit with the demands of the world. The story of Misr is a tragedy not because it fell, but because at two distinct moments in its history, it achieved a kind of perfection, only to find that perfection itself is the most dangerous illusion of all.